It's my nerd world. I'm your host, Jon Justice, a Star Wars podcast. Welcome to the show this week. It's going to be a big one. I wrestled with how I wanted to handle all the content that we have for the show this week, and I have landed on what I'm going to do, and now I'm going to share it with you. So, on the show this week, got a couple of items we'll get to. I want to talk a little Last Jedi, some Christian themes, and I'm not going to go Bible thumping or anything, but I had a couple thoughts that got my mind going in a few different directions when it comes to Luke Skywalker and what happened with him in The Last Jedi that could potentially have some relevancy as we speculate on the rise of Skywalker, and it's sort of related around some Christian themes. I'll share that with you. MakingStarWars.net and Jason Ward put out an interesting article talking about Zorri Bliss and her potential connection with Rey. Again, informed speculation, not big spoilers, and why we care. Plus, a crossover conversation, a lengthy conversation that I had with a buddy of mine, Zack from the Knights of Vader podcast. We talk about a lot of different things. We talk about Disney marketing. We talk a bit about mind-melting potential final scenes in the movie. It was a really fun conversation. And so that'll be taking place right before we get to the listener feedback portion of the show. Also, I have a big announcement. Many of you probably already know, but for those that don't, the second book in my science fiction space opera series, EMBARK, Treasure in Darkness Book 2, is available right now, and I really need your help this weekend, and because of that, I have an incredible special for everybody listening. I'll give you more details a little bit later on, but here's a bit of the preview. Right now, you can pick up my first book, EMBARK, in ebook for free. I'm trying to get the book out to as many people as possible. You can pick up EMBARK, the ebook, for free. Paperback is $11.99, and you can pick up the brand new, just released Treasure in Darkness Book 2 for 99 cents. More details coming up later on in the show, but I really hope you'll help support the show and help with my book sales this weekend as I try to hit some top rankings that'll really help me promote the book going down the road. So more details on that a little bit later on. For now, let's go ahead and dive into this week's show because we got a lot of ground to cover.
We've passed on all we know. 1,000 generations live in you now. But this is your fight. We'll always be with you. No one's ever really gone.
I will finish what you started.
Who are you?
I'm no one. There are stories about what happened.
It's true. All of it.
The Force. It's calling to you. Just let it in.
I am so glad you're with the show this week. Thank you so much for downloading and listening to My Nerd World, a Star Wars podcast. And a quick thank you, and I'll get into more of this coming up in the listener feedback portion of the show. But you guys are just some of the best listeners. It really is amazing, and I cannot thank you enough. It's a really big weekend for me. My second book in my science fiction space opera series, something I never thought in a million years that I would ever be doing, and that is writing novels. But my second book, as I mentioned at the start of the show, EMBARK, Treasure in Darkness, Book 2, is out and released, and it's really exciting to see people reaching out to me, say, hey, I got the ebook and my hard copy of the paperback came in, and I can't wait to hear everybody's reaction to it. You heard the special at the start of the show, and I'll talk about it a little bit later on, but I'm going to be completely straight up honest with you. If I could get a quarter of those of you that download this show and listen every single week to go up and pick up a free copy of my first book, or just for 99 cents, an ebook copy of my second book. Of course, the paperback as well, right? But even gift it to a friend right there on Amazon. There's on the right below where you decide what version you want to purchase on the Amazon page. There is a little widget where you can click and a link where you can gift the book to a friend. If I could get a quarter or half of those listen to the show to go and pick up a copy of either book this weekend, I could shatter a lot of these rankings, right? It's kind of like if you were going to place your book in a library, where would you put it? And I've put the EMBARK series in a couple of different categories: space opera, science fiction, young adult, science fiction, action, adventure, stuff like that. But like I said, if I could just get a fraction of you that listen to the show every week to pick up a free copy, right? Even if you don't read ebooks, pick up a free copy of the first book, and especially the second book to help increase it, I could shatter a lot of these rankings, and I'd be able to use that to help promote the book further as I continue working on the audiobook for book 2 and continue writing book 3 in the trilogy. So that's my quick appeal. I know, I spent a couple minutes there. Thank you very much. I really do appreciate it. I'll talk about it a little bit later on, and we'll get to Star Wars stuff right now. But if you could, go to Amazon.com at some point and pick up a copy of the book, I really, really would appreciate it. All right, let's dive into it. This is going to be a lengthy show this week. You probably saw it when you downloaded it, that it's a long one. And the reason it's a long one is because I had this long, fantastic conversation with a buddy of mine, Zack Weber, over at Knights of Vader. And I'm going to be putting that in the show after I get through a couple of different news items before we get to listener feedback. I had thought about separating out our conversation to a separate podcast, but I decided to keep it all together as one big show this week. I also did a bonus podcast earlier this week, in case you didn't see it, talking about this article that came out from MakingStarWars.net that was put up on the Reddit leaks page, giving some more background to the Sith troopers, where they may be coming from, a Sith fleet. Go and download that earlier this week bonus podcast and give that a listen. It was some really fun speculation in there. It's not very long, but go and download it and check it out. I opted to not include it on this week's show and leave it as a bonus podcast. All right, so let's get to a couple of items, and then we'll hear from Zack Weber and our conversation this week from the Knights of Vader. First off, I want to start here. I'm excited about tonight. I'm going to be watching The Last Jedi later on tonight, and that's always something exciting. But I haven't watched it in a few weeks. I went out to the guy that I work with, Drew, the guy who hosts the show with me here at Twin Cities News Talk. I went over to his house last night, so I didn't get my normal movie watching time in. And the rest of the family is going to be heading out and doing some stuff tonight. So later on this evening, I'm going to be sitting down and watching The Last Jedi, and I'm really, really looking forward to watching that movie again, just because I love it so much. But I was thinking about The Rise of Skywalker, especially with this new material about this potential Sith fleet and where they may have been coming from and how this plays into The Rise of Skywalker. And I got to thinking about that final act that Luke Skywalker did of teleporting himself off that rock on Ahch-To and having that projection fight with Kylo Ren at the end of The Last Jedi on Crate, right? First off, I was thinking, what a bummer for those Star Wars fans that felt that Luke wasn't handled correctly in The Last Jedi, because there's so many great Last Jedi moments with Luke Skywalker. And it would be such a bummer I can understand why it would be such a bummer for a fan who didn't like the direction that Rian Johnson took for Luke Skywalker, which I loved, and not be able to enjoy some of those fantastic moments in the film. The whole Rey going to the dark side cave and the mirror cave scene, right, leading into the famous finger touch and Levin scene, and then Luke coming and force blowing up the hut, and then he gets into that fantastic stick battle, right, in the rain with Rey. I mean, it's one of those moments where even I forget to think about it, or even I forget about it. And when I'm watching the movie, I'm like, oh my gosh, I forgot. We get this really awesome fight between Rey and Luke, and it's such another great moment in that film. So, anyways, I'm thinking about all these things and the show this week, and I got this I got this thought of sort of the correlation between Luke Skywalker and the themes in Christianity of, and it's not just Christianity, but I'm a Christian, and so that's where my mind immediately goes. But the, Christ's crucifixion, right, dying on the cross to forgive us for our sins, and the parallels that you see with Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi, right, dying for the cause of the others, to help the resistance, to help the rebels, right? The rebellion is reborn today in that moment, and him giving the sacrifice to be also an inspiration for others, leading to the end of that film, and of course the kids back on Crate. And I mentioned this before; it always cracks me up because many of those that criticize The Last Jedi have such a hard time with Canto Bight. I may have said Crate a moment ago. I meant Canto Bight. They have such a hard time with Canto Bight, and yet you don't hear a lot of talk of the end of the movie and that moment with the kids, and we actually do end on Canto Bight. It makes me laugh a bit. But obviously the children were inspired by Luke, and the boy there has got his makeshift toys recreating the battle on Crate, and then of course you get Broom Boy at the end and looking towards the stars and lifting up his broom as if it were a lightsaber. And it got me thinking down this road of, wow, I wonder if in The Rise of Skywalker, when we continue to talk about what The Rise of Skywalker could actually mean, if this is really pointing towards, like J.J. Abrams said, we'll know kind of what The Rise of Skywalker is in The Rise of Skywalker. It'll become obvious. I'm very much along the lines that it could be talking about Ben Solo. Okay, I'm a fan of that. I'm not dismissing that. But I also think that there is this possibility, especially when you watch the trailer, where every generation needs a legend, right? I know they're talking about Rey, but that's Luke too. And I wonder if the actions in The Rise of Skywalker, how closely they will be related, and how closely the rebellion resistance will be bolstered by Luke's sacrifice, and how much of that is going to weigh over the movie. It'd be a nice bookend to the trilogy of the first movie. Luke lingered heavily throughout the whole film because they were looking for him, right? Then he gives the ultimate sacrifice in order to help the rebellion and provide a spark of hope to the galaxy. Then we head into The Rise of Skywalker, and maybe we see that spark lit, and Luke once again hangs heavy over that final film as an inspiration for those that rise up to join the fight against the First Order and this potential Sith First Order Imperial fleet that may have come from the unknown regions. That gets me really, really excited. Also, and I mentioned this earlier in the week, and I may have put it out as a blast on the Blaster app, but with this leak of the Sith Trooper and this fleet, and again, I won't go into the details now. Listen to that bonus podcast, and I covered it at length there. But with that, if they arrive early in the film and the First Order's ranks have increased because this Sith Trooper fleet has come from the unknown regions and is now joining with the First Order as part of Palpatine's plans, it reminded me of the comments that were made about the movie from Oscar Isaac and John Boyega, who a while ago mentioned, John Boyega talked about guerrilla warfare in the film. I think with some of the locations, the jungle locations we keep hearing about, probably has a lot to do with that comment. But John Boyega made comments of, there's war going on. The galaxy is at war. And I'm starting to get the feeling that we're in for a bit of a jarring, in a good way, start to the film, where we left our villains and our heroes at the end of The Last Jedi kind of not knowing exactly what state we're going to be in, and a very sort of personal conflict between these two factions, one dwindling and one larger. When we start The Rise of Skywalker, if the whole situation hasn't erupted to the point of war has begun, and maybe this is why and how the resistance/rebellion ends up getting the support that it needs, because of the oppressive First Order with this larger fleet now of Sith troopers being pushed in some way, shape, or form by Palpatine's plans for galactic conquest, which was on that plaque at San Diego Comic-Con for the Sith Trooper before it was removed. I talked about this earlier in that bonus show. But if the galaxy is at war, and that's an aspect of this that has me, again, really, really excited. And as I mentioned in that bonus show, this movie is shaping up to be much bigger than I had anticipated, certainly on scale. So that, I mean, all of that just has me just super excited, and I cannot wait to get to some more material from the movie. And I talk about this with Zack a little bit later on, and I'm going to give you a warning now. I pride myself on being a very positive host, and many of you comment on that often. That doesn't mean that I don't get frustrated with stuff, and it does. Zack and I don't get heated, but the conversation gets heated because I'm genuinely frustrated with the way that Disney has been handling the marketing for Star Wars, and that's a big part of the conversation that I have with Zack coming up here in just a few minutes. We talk specifically about that, and I get a little heated, so I'm just warning you right now. I'm still keeping it positive, but I'm also keeping it real as well. All right, let's go ahead and let's move over to this.
Something inside me has always been there. But now it's awake. And I need help.
All right, so here's some informed speculation, right, from Jason Ward at MakingStarWars.net. He says this: my buddy at Bespin Bulletin and I have been having conversations about the role of Kerry Russell's Zorri Bliss in The Rise of Skywalker. Yesterday, we talked about the MacGuffin from The Rise of Skywalker, and today, maybe something about Rey's backstory. For the last year, my sources have said that Zorri is helpful and aids the heroes in escaping the ice planet, now known to be the world of Kijimi. On said world, some hijinks with 3PO's memories take place, and he's backed up into R2's hard drive for lack of a better term. I've also heard that Zorri helps them escape the planet, and it appears she sticks with the heroes or the Resistance to some extent after their meeting on Kijimi. When I saw Zorri's ship last year, it did remind me of the ship that drops Rey off on Jakku, but the photo was less than ideal, and it did resemble the shuttle from Star Wars The Force Awakens, but was no more the smoking gun than the trailer was, because the look at the ship isn't that great in Star Wars The Force Awakens. Now, Bespin Bulletin has seen the ship flying with the heroes, and Zorri is placed with our heroes and never the villains in extraneous materials. He's empirically witnessed. I've been told that Rey even commands the familiarity of the ship itself in The Rise of Skywalker. So here is their theory. He wrote that. It's pretty funny, though. Bespin Bulletin and Making Star Wars have a theory that Zorri might have been working for the bad guys when Rey was 7 years old. But when the bad guys, the First Order, or the stooges carrying out Palpatine's plans like Operation Cinder, wanted to harm an innocent girl, Zorri took her and dropped her off on Jakku so she would be safe. The theory kind of reminds me of how Ventress saved the princess from Boba Fett in the Clone Wars. Or perhaps she knew Rey's parents. Either way, we have a ship that appears to be Zorri's that looks just like the ship that dropped Rey off on Jakku in The Force Awakens, and now we have a ship that looks just like it in The Rise of Skywalker, and Rey commenting on how it looks familiar. In the trailer for The Rise of Skywalker, we see the ship that looks like Zorri's flying towards Kijimi, which we have placed her at in the droid repair/factory sequence with Dio. So, there's circumstantial evidence that allows for some fairly good conjecture that the ship is Zorri's ride. Vanity Fair also confirmed she's on this world in their photos and text. Who else could the ship reasonably belong to in the film? Is it a hero's vehicle? And it isn't Resistance, but it is with the good guys and not attacking them. I think there's a pretty compelling case to be made here for it being Zorri's ship. The sticker book version of the ship looks different than the ship we're seeing in 9, but it also resembles Rey's Junker ship in the cockpit from the concept art. Kerry Russell was involved in filming in the latter part of the summer of 2019. There really wasn't anything being done on the snow world of Kijimi for the most part. It doesn't seem she wasn't doing pickup shots, something small, but also is evidence for her having more work than what we saw, than what we know of right now for the Kijimi sequences. This is not confirmed yet. Of course, we are speculating, and the speculation is informed and not just a fan theory we pulled from nowhere. Hopefully, we can place this ship to the owner sooner or later. If this is accurate, Zorri is more than a point of contact for stopping the First Order, but also has secrets and information about Rey we've all been dying to know about the galaxy's most famous nobody. Bespin Bulletin and Making Star Wars are on the case. All right. So before I get into my further commentary on this particular leak, I want to share with you another quick article from Esquire. Esquire has been doing some pretty decent articles on the Rise of Skywalker as of late. And it goes like this. The first two entries in the new Star Wars trilogy have teased fans with tiny bits of information about Rey's past. The Force Awakens, Rey touches Luke's lightsaber, has a vision. Her parents are flying away, leaving her on Jakku. In The Last Jedi, Kylo Ren tells her their parents were filthy junk traders who sold her off for drinking money. They're dead in a pauper's grave. What's interesting is that these two details don't really add up. If Rey's parents flew away, abandoning her on Jakku, why did they end up buried in a pauper's grave? So, who are we to believe here, Kylo Ren or Rey's vision, according to Esquire? Going into Star Wars The Rise of Skywalker, Rey's origins remain one of the biggest mysteries in the new trilogy, and according to a leaked image from the Star Wars guide posted on Reddit, Rey might not have been from Jakku originally after all. And sure enough, you see on this and on this card, abandoned. A tiny Rey watches helplessly as a starship pulls away, marooning her on the unfamiliar world of Jakku. Starship study. Rey learns to pilot starships using a scavenged computer and flight simulator found among the wrecks of the starship graveyard. A new path. Rey rescues BB-8 from Tito and gets herself mixed up in the struggle between the First Order and the Resistance. And then a change of plans. Intended on stealing the quad jumper, Rey changes her plans when it explodes, and she, Finn, and BB-8 must flee Jakku in the Millennium Falcon. Most of this information we already know, but the language of the first point of the timeline appears to suggest that Rey wasn't from Jakku at all. A tiny Rey watches helplessly as the starship pulls away, marooning her on the unfamiliar world of Jakku. That would mean that Rey was born and raised as a baby on a different planet, then left on Jakku by her parents. This would also seem to hint that Kylo Ren was lying about Rey's parents, because if they did leave her on an unfamiliar planet, why would they go back there and die as nobodies? More importantly, though, why would Rey be abandoned on Jakku at all? Rey's vision appears to show her being sold off to or left with the junk trader Unkar Plutt on Jakku. Based on the information from Kylo Ren, Rey was sold off to him for drinking money, but there are other possibilities too. Rey could have been left there to hide her from the Jedi or the Sith, or both. There's another pretty important secret on Jakku, though. As it has been outlined in the supplemental Star Wars books and comics, Emperor Palpatine set up a research facility on Jakku to help search out old Sith relics. Right? The Jakku Observatory was an observatory located on Jakku. It was part of the network of Emperor Palpatine's observatories across the galaxy. The Jakku Observatory was part of the Emperor's contingency plan to destroy the Empire in the event of his death. It was located under the Plantive Hand Plateau and housed a replica of the Emperor's yacht Imperialis, computers displaying a map of the unknown regions, a storehouse of Sith relics and artifacts, and a borehole which led to Jakku's core. The future counselor to the Empire, Gallus Rax, was tasked with using the Jakku Observatory to execute the contingency by detonating Jakku in the orbiting Imperial and New Republic fleets. However, he was foiled by Grand Admiral Ray Sloan, Nora Wexley, and Breton Lore Wexley. Many fan theories appear to connect Palpatine with Rey, so it is possible that Rey, a powerful Force user, was left on Jakku as part of the Emperor's contingency plan. There's plenty to think about heading into the Rise of Skywalker. Now, that would contradict a bit with what Jason Ward and Bespin Bulletin were talking about, I think. And, of course, then comes in the conversation of what was the truth and what wasn't the truth of what Kylo Ren was saying to Rey on the supremacy. And I think there's a lot of available options there. I know Many of you think that Kylo Ren was lying at the time, or wasn't lying, that he wouldn't lie to Rey. He might have seen something wrong. They both didn't necessarily see what they thought they were going to see in their visions. You'll turn, and we didn't get any of that on either side of it, unless that was foreshadowing something that we see coming up a little bit later on. So why does all this matter? Well, it matters because we care. And why do we care? We care because these are the things that we relate to. And this is the beauty of Star Wars and what George Lucas created. I said it before, I'll say it again. George Lucas ruined it for everybody that wanted to go and create content, because he did this thing and it's not like he was the first one to do it, but he certainly was the most popular one to do it and kind of took it away from everybody else. But in this, a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, here is your science fiction fantasy story that has these ships that are completely unfamiliar, but yet familiar because it's this lived-in universe. And within this galaxy of wonderful things, right? Just beautiful planets and exotic people and aliens and creatures and amazing vehicles and starships and these rules that he made that grounded in a sense of sort of reality that is acceptable to us as a viewer because it's a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. So why couldn't these things happen, right? Within all of that are these fundamental stories to all of our lives. Family, companionship, love, pain. And the parent part of it is crucial. It's crucial for young people growing up who are, living under the roof of their household. It's crucial for parents raising children. These are all things that matter to us. I'm constantly surprised, and I remind myself of how children look to their parents. And I think about how I look at my dad, and I go, wow, my sons look at me like that. These things matter. The family unit is incredibly important. And so here we have these characters in this fantasy world that we love, these characters that we love and we're drawn to, and we want to know their background because we care about them, because we care about our parents. And that's just the thing about Star Wars that makes it so great. It's the thing that I wanted to tap into, and I may or may not have, I don't know. But it's the thing that I wanted to tap into when I started writing my stories, is I wanted to do something similar. My stories in EMBARK are grounded in Earth in the future, to afford me the opportunity to kind of set my own ground rules via technology to do the things exciting that I wanted to do in the story. I can't have lightsabers and I don't have the Force, but I can put in a belief system where on Earth people believe that everything happens for a reason, and it's a guiding principle that is both positive and negative for people. I can also push the envelope in terms of technology to do some of the fantastical things that I want to do, and hopefully go and make it relatable. And I owe that to George Lucas and the way that he inspired me to write those stories. And this is what Disney and Lucasfilm need to do moving forward. This is what they have to go and continue to provide to us as fans. Is if you're gonna start, and they will, and we'll get into this in just to hear a moment with Zach Weber. But if we're gonna have these new storylines and these new sagas, Disney better make sure these content creators, or let me put it this way, these content creators, Rian Johnson, I'm not scared of it, but Benioff and Weiss and whoever else ends up directing these films moving forward, I'm confident they will, but they better tap into that stuff that makes it relatable, that gets us asking questions because we care about the characters, because we can see ourselves in them. I love the character of Kylo Ren, and that's one of the reasons why I love what they did, or what Rian Johnson did with him in The Last Jedi. Because while I'm not a person who's influenced by a dark side entity, right, and I had good parents that didn't send me off to go and be trained by a relative or anything like that, I can certainly relate to his potential feelings towards this girl, Rey, and how she is affecting him on an emotional level, how important it is for us to have that counterpoint in somebody, and what that means, and how that affects our lives, and how it affects our decision making. That's why when you go to that scene at the end of the Praetorian Guard fight on the Supremacy in The Last Jedi, And that moment where Kylo Ren reaches out to Rey and is like, join me. And I'm convinced that at the time he's willing to give it all up, right? He wants it all to die. The Sith, the Jedi, let it all die. But the reason he wants to do that is because of the girl standing in front of him, right? He makes the jump. He makes the leap to her. And I can understand that. I can relate to that. That's what love does to dudes. It messes with your head. And then what happens? She rejects him. Not only does she reject him, but she tries to get the legacy saber from him, and he can't get it. And she ends up getting away. So he has to go and lie to Hux, and now he's pissed and back on his dark side mission. But what did Rey do? She left him alive. She didn't kill him. Says a lot. All right. Let's go ahead and get to the conversation that I had with Zack Weber from Knights of Vader. I'd been meaning to have him on for a long time, and you'll hear that in the audio here. And we had to record. We recorded this earlier this week. I was having some computer issues and glitches, and so we recorded it. And I did a quick segment on his show, and I'll be on his show sometime down the road. But he was kind enough to allow me to promote my science fiction book on his show, so he'll be putting that on the show. And then we got into this I was planning on going about 15, 20 minutes. We ended up going for over an hour, and I really enjoyed the conversation. I hope you do too. As we start, and again, I mentioned I was going to be talking about this throughout the show, but like I said at the start of the show, as you're listening, if you're sitting there in front of the computer, please, it would just mean everything to me if you could go to Amazon.com and grab a copy of of my science fiction books, either for you or a friend. Again, you can gift them to a friend right there on the page. Like I said, if I could get a fraction of you guys that download and listen to the show every week to go and pick up a free copy, or just drop $1 to pick up the ebook, I could really shatter some of these records on Amazon. That would just be fantastic and would really go a long way in helping me to expand my audience of books and grow my audience beyond the people that know me in radio and the people that listen to you great people that listen to me here on the podcast. So go to Amazon.com and pick up your copy for you or a friend. In the meantime, while you do that, let's go ahead and talk with, again, Zack Weber from the Knights of Vader.
We are the spark that'll light the fire that'll burn the First Order down.
All right, so Zack from Cinemodities, but more specifically, what we want to promote is Knights of Vader, a podcast that one of the few that I listen to on a weekly basis. That's not like, that sounds weird, but I really enjoy your guys' show and your take, and I've been wanting to have you on my show for the longest time, but I record like just sort of willy-nilly when I head into the weekend, and it's like, so it's difficult to coordinate. But we finally made it happen today, and we made it happen today by having Zack record me from where he is, and then he sent me the audio, and I put it into the show. So that's how we made this happen.
Hence why the audio is so poor, folks.
And sorry it took so long. I meant to have you on a long time ago, and just wasn't able to make it happen. So I'm glad that we can finally do that. So let's dive into it. First off, I want to ask you for a little bit of clarification. I haven't finished the entire episode yet, but I was listening to one of your latest shows, and you were kind enough to give my Nerd World the shout out. And you and Zinger were talking about putting the spoiler label on speculation, right?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So go ahead and state your position on that, and then I wanna unpack it a little bit, because I don't necessarily disagree, but I wanna kind of see where your head is totally at, because I'm gonna offer a bit of a different angle on it. So what is
my take?
Talking about spoilers, but it's more like just speculation.
My take is, and if you live in the world of Star Wars spoilers, if you're not a spoiler phobe, you've seen this a couple of times now, whether it be on Instagram or people's websites. They'll have some sort of scoop, and they'll preface it with the phrase, spoiler warning, don't share this. And I look at that, and I get it. It's a nicety. It's a courtesy to the viewer or the reader. I have no problems with it on that level, though. But I think there's a level of egotism and possibly narcissism in reporting a scoop or a rumor and selling it as a spoiler to a degree. I think, not that it's wrong, like I said, it's a courtesy first and foremost, but I can't help but see that there's an underbelly of egotism to it.
See, now here's my take on it. I think there's a difference between, there's different sort of categories that falls into. You have sort of your straight up leaks, but I also put in that sort of informed, you have your straight up leaks, and then you have your informed speculation. So, like for a site specifically, makingstarwars.net. For those that follow Jason Ward over there, he's kind of been at the forefront of having the most relevant and accurate inside information, certainly on The Force Awakens, less so about The Last Jedi. It remains to be seen about The Rise of Skywalker. But Jason's got a way of, if he talks about it on his podcast, but doesn't put it up as an article to share, he'll usually sort of preface that he hasn't got the information confirmed by other sources. If he's put the story up on his site, like he had one this week, the Sith troopers and what their origin might be in The Rise of Skywalker. And in that, he does what he normally does. And he included, hey, I've checked this with multiple sources, and that's why I'm confident of putting it up as an article. And as far as I know, every time he's done that, it's been accurate. So for me, there's the informed speculation part of it. Like if you get a leak and then you can go speculate. If somebody's putting up a leak, depending on who the outlet is, I'm usually assuming that I've done my due diligence to know whether or not this person's just making stuff up or they've been able to confirm this by multiple sources. So am I laying out the difference there, and do you see a difference there? I'm trying to kind of get at the heart specifically of who you or what you were exactly pointing to, because you and I went back and forth quite a bit on Twitter earlier this week talking about Bespin Bulletin.
The Bespin Bulletin thing was fun because context to my nerd world out there is John posted it was about the Sith troopers having jetpacks,
right?
And I'm like, I got a weird feeling about Bespin Bulletin. Just got a feeling, not saying good or bad, just got a feeling about that. But going to the crux of what you're saying is that I understand, in the sense of the spoiler rumor game. But there's actually a person that I've been following for years now, almost 10 years. His name is Jim Hill. We've had him on my Knights of Vader. He's more of a theme park person, but he covers the Disney entertainment industry as a whole. And he reports rumors all the time, and he doesn't give any preface or disclaimer. Because when I look at rumors and stuff, I kind of go into it knowing it is a very, very fluid situation. And I'm like, oh, one day this character might be doing this, or maybe that day a certain ship will show up in the film. I understand that the filmmaking process, or even anything in entertainment, is a very busy thing, and things come and go. I'm not, let's say that when The Rise of Skywalker comes out, and let's say the Sith troopers don't have jetpacks, I'm not going to put Jason Ward in Bespin Bulletin and burn them at the stake. I'm not going to do that because that's just not who I am. I see it as fodder for conversation's sake. Sadly, probably a nice portion of the fandom doesn't see it that way, because I know after every single one of these movies comes out, even if it's not just Star Wars, whether it be Marvel or DC, there's always a dozen articles saying, oh, who got it right? Who got it wrong? And it's like, who cares?
Right.
My thing too is that if you stumble into making Star Wars, you're not just stumbling into it looking for a general summary or synopsis of a Star Wars film. You know what their shtick is. You know what their quote unquote industry is within the Star Wars fandom. So if you click on an article saying Matt Smith's role in The Rise of Skywalker revealed, a disclaimer is almost redundant, because if you're, I don't want to say dumb enough to click on that, but if you're going to sit there going this, again, knowing how anal retentive J.J. Abrams is, he doesn't want you knowing anything about this movie outside of what official marketing materials are giving you. So you have to make up your mind about this pretty much the moment the title is announced. How much do I want to know about this movie? And that's where I kind of come into. I agree with you. It's Jason Ward. It's Bespin Bulletin. It's the rumors game. But at the same time, to put a disclaimer on something that you kind of have to very deliberately go into just seems like a weird thing to do. But again, I can see that it's a courtesy. I'm not spiting anybody for that.
Yeah, and I think that's all. I think that's all that I was driving at, because I do that on my show a lot. I mean, I'll put up the podcast titles and say new details, new leaks, and I try to do my best. And I'm certainly not. I mean, you know me pretty well. I mean, I'm not an ego-driven dude. That's just not my nature. I'm just doing it more so to let people know, hey, this is potentially legit information. If you are trying to stay spoiler free, make sure you do that. And certainly when I get into the show in and of itself, I do that. I mean, I think for a lot of us, I think you're like this and I'm like this. Not everybody, not all the podcasts are like this, but I think for a lot of us, we got a pretty good BS meter. We've been following this stuff on Reddit enough to kind of know and look at it and go, whether or not it's legit or not. Most of the stuff as of late, Jason Ward certainly went and backed it up. But you can sort of tell the actors that are out there pushing it a little too far. Like Jason, like MakingStarWars.net has arguably the best information and the most legit information they have over the course of the past several years. But I don't look at Jason Ward as somebody who's necessarily doing it to pump his ego. He doesn't present it that way. Whereas the Bespin Bulletin, whoever that is, I can see where people might kind of go, because he kind of keep going out of their way to, hey, if you share this, give me credit, this kind of thing. And it I don't know. I got a little bit turned off by that, by the way they were posting it as opposed to the way that Jason Ward. It's all really semantics, though, at the end of the day. But I think you get what I'm driving at.
Oh, yeah, I do.
I guess really what I'm trying to ask you, Zach, is why are you so cynical?
No, it's funny. I knew you were going to bring that up. I knew that. I knew you were going to ask that, and I'm going to answer your question with another question.
Okay.
Where's the line between cynic and pragmatist? Where's that line? And you can't blame me for being cynical when it comes to the Star Wars fandom.
I don't blame you when it comes to this. And being pragmatic. I don't know. I think it really just depends on how you want to take it. Your cynicism is warranted. I don't argue with that. I just think it all comes down to choices. That's all. I listen to Knights of Vader every week, so it can't annoy me if that's the case. No, I don't know. You are being practical and pragmatic about it. I like to, again, I guess I just use my own personal BS meter. That's how I kind of approach it when I see these leaks, and I can kind of gauge which ones are legit and which ones aren't, and which ones are worth talking about and which ones aren't worth talking about. And so I just try to have more fun with it. I can tell the people that are looking to get attention and think that they're cool because they're getting the leak, and it's annoying. I get that, and I can understand why that would be bothersome to you. So, it's not a critique. It was just more of a criticism. It was more just a question.
Well, it's more, I don't think it bothers me. I think okay. It bothers me in the sense of, because, and Zenger makes fun of me on my own podcast about this, in that, like, I called the Kylo Ren and Rey back-to-back fight. I called her reforging the Luke Skywalker saber. And I got Solo wrong a lot. I was convinced that Harrison Ford was going to bookend that film, or at the very least, it would be like a flashback, him telling the story. But my question is that, like, some of these things I can predict. As John has listened, I have this thing. I'm not going to say it because it might be a spoiler, but I'm convinced that there's going to be a moment in this film that's going to be on par with Captain America picking up Thor's hammer. I'm just convinced, and based on what I said alone, you could almost imagine the scenario without me explicitly laying it out. And when that happens come December, that's how confident I am in this. Can I go around saying, someone at Lucasfilm told me this? Like, that's where I draw the line, because certain things, like, too, whether you call it a BS meter or just knowing how things work. Again, you're a media personality. You understand the entertainment business. There are certain things you can surmise. And after a while, where do you draw the line between, I can infer this, and in order to get clicks and retweets and upvotes, I'm going to claim insider knowledge? Because as Knights of Vader's downloads goes, I can tell you, we're not in the insiders club. We don't have that sort of download numbers. But that's my thing, though. Is like, I think you're in the same boat as I am, is that you understand both the industry and Star Wars, and you're able to infer. And I think we're not exclusive. We're not rare people in that sense. But other people aren't as ethical, if you can even call it that.
Sure.
And that's kind of my question, is that we could be heisters, we could be hustlers, we could do that. We could sit there, make a laundry list of things, and when they don't come to fruition, be like, oh, my source, they changed things. JJ edited that once he heard me go live with it. We could do that easily.
I think we landed on the difference. Here's the difference for me. Okay. Somebody putting out a piece of information, for me, the difference between its potential legitimacy and it being sort of speculation labeled as spoiler is if the person providing it has said, I've heard from multiple sources, I've confirmed with multiple sources that have both said or all said this is true, or I have seen blank. That's the difference in my opinion. And this goes back to Bespin Bulletin. Bespin Bulletin was very specific to say, I have seen blank. Like, I have seen the orange X-Wing fighter and it labeled Poe's X-Wing fighter. I'm convinced that that particular site on Instagram has seen some of the toy merchandising. That's what I believe that they've been looking at and what they're reporting on. And as a matter of fact, I had a quick exchange with whoever the person is, I didn't say, and that was not disputed. So that's the difference for me. Somebody talking about Matt Smith and making sort of a speculation spoiler. No, it's not a spoiler. You're just speculating. Somebody saying they have seen something or talked to multiple people who have told them, that to me is you're heading down a better path of a legitimate leak and therefore worthy of the label spoiler.
But how hard is it to claim that a new Star Wars vehicle is going to have a toy? How hard is that? That's I can say that right now, that the TIE, you know what, John, giving you an exclusive on my Nerd World, I have numerous sources confirming to me that the TIE Dagger will show up in merchandising come October 1st.
Oh, sure. But that's a difference between saying I have seen evidence.
Okay, throw that in there too. I have multiple sources. I have seen it, and when it does happen, I can claim now that I have an insider source. That's again. I'm not, again, folks. John and I are mentally sparring. This is an exercise in thought. This is not anything hostile. And like I said, Best and Bull can do whatever they want. I don't. It's their own. Who am I to tell them how to do their job? That's not I'm not saying that. I'm just pointing out that I'm just skeptical of claiming insider knowledge based on things that any Star Wars fan, like, even for example, John, you saw the visual dictionary cover. Look at all the things on the cover of that. I could say that Knight of Ren on the cover, I've seen it in physical merchandise. That toy is going to show up as an action figure come October 1st. Well, it's Star Wars. Everything's going to be a toy eventually. It's not hard to say those sort of things. And that's where I'm a little bit not irked at Bespin Bulletin, because they were claiming that was the Sith Trooper again with the jetpack. And just the day before, we had a Lego leak with the little white First Order jet trooper. And the very next day, it was like, oh, there's going to be a Sith one too. Well, of course there is. It's Star Wars. There's 1,000 variants. And you're basically taking one that was just announced the previous day before. And I appreciate Bespin Bulletin replied to me, not to John for some weird reason, but just to me, saying that, oh, we were going to go live with it, but that person on Reddit beat them to it. And it's like, okay. And it's like, yeah, I was about to purchase the winning lotto numbers until the person ahead of me picked the numbers before me. That's such a weird argument or an explanation to give. But again, to each his own. Who am I to judge?
Yeah, I guess for me, if you're going to go so far as to lie like that, that's on that person and they got to live with it. You know what I mean? If it's something like, if Bespin Bulletin had said, oh, we know for sure the TIE Dagger is going to be a toy, I'd be like, well, yeah, that's kind of obvious. It's there there's a picture of it right there on the cover, and I give you that. Going so far as to say there's also going to be a Sith Trooper that's a jetpack. Well, okay. To go so far as to add it further and talking about how the helmet's different, which they got into, I'm like, all right, so if you're lying, you're lying. I mean, I guess for me, Zach, I'm not going to be so skeptical as to not allow myself the enjoyment of looking at something saying, I think there might be some legitimacy to that, and then reporting on it. You know what I mean?
I hear you.
And I'm also, and we talked about this online, and then we can get to what I wanted to ask you about. But I'm also of the opinion that as we move forward in the fandom and these particular entities, right, Bespin Bulletin or Making Star Wars or Mike Zero or whatever, and we talked about this in the tweets. If it turns out that they end up being wrong, right, and again, their leaks are are not anything that you and I couldn't have guessed or deduced and claimed it was a leak. But if they do turn out to be wrong on stuff, I've seen several other individuals who've gone onto Reddit, you have too, who have claimed to have a bunch of information. People bought into it for a bit of time, and it turned out it wasn't true. Whenever those names pop back up again within the Reddit world, people are quick to go, that person's not legit. Because usually when anything new pops up, people will say, is this person legit? Have we seen stuff from them before? I think it's oddly the fandom within like the Reddit leaks community, they do a fairly decent job of kind of policing that and trying to weed out the individuals who aren't legit. I think Bestman Bulletin is still a big sort of question mark, whereas a site like MakingStarWars.net has proved time and time again that their stuff's been pretty legit.
Yeah, I agree. Jason Ward, you can't argue with his track record. Yes, he was kind of MIA for Last Jedi, which is kind of refreshing in a way to go into a movie without really any sort of, I don't want to say fog, but
Sure.
any sort of just like preconceived notions. And I think that in a weird way, the lack of leaks from The Last Jedi, I think might have, in a way, add to that film's response or the fandom's response to it. I think in a weird way, the fact that we had no idea about certain things. I wouldn't be surprised if maybe even Disney's looking at it this way, that maybe they're kind of like sprinkling things into the conversation, just kind of like easing people into the water with certain ideas. Just that is a radical notion, just throwing it out there. I pulled the pin on the hand grenade. I just lobbed it into the middle of my nerd world. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's weird. The spoiler game is a weird thing. But the thing again, I don't want to delve on or harp on this too long though, but look at Mike Zero. Like the other day, I was doing something and I typed The Rise of Skywalker into YouTube. And I typed literally The Rise of Skywalker because I wanted the trailer. I was saying the trailer to somebody. And the first two search results were Mike Zero videos. And I looked at that and I go, how is the Google YouTube algorithm that messed up? And two, why is Disney not on that? That a charlatan has somehow hijacked the algorithm, whether intentionally or unintentionally, and considering how I don't think anyone's going to claim Mike Zero is that bright, or maybe he is. He's a great charlatan. But how on earth is that ranked higher than the trailer? Like, that is just like, and it's not even like it was suggested based on like, I know someone's going to say, oh, it's because of your search things. It's like, I do not watch any speculation videos on YouTube. That's not my thing. And I could not believe that. And look at Mike Zero. He gets like 30,000 views per video, and he puts out like 2 or 3 videos a day.
Yeah, the Mike Zero, God, we can spend a whole hour on that. That's a phenomenon I don't understand, because I've read several comments from people, I mean, over and over again, of people who say, yeah, I just like reading this stuff. I'm like, wow, like even though you know it's BS, you still like, I mean, I think there's a different, and again, I think it comes down to sort of the fandom and what people enjoy. You know, I think that there's like, if you start to like line up the level of skepticism, right? I think you're above me. I think you're more skeptical than I am. And then I'm probably like right below you. And then you go down, 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 down. And then you got this level of fan down here that just doesn't care. Like, it's another form of entertainment to him. Even if they're heart of hearts, they know that he's nothing but a liar. It doesn't matter. They like going and reading what he has to say. And I don't understand.
But okay, real world example. It was a month ago now. My local town played the original Star Wars trilogy. I went, and obviously being the host of a podcast, a Star Wars podcast, I had to hawk my wares. And there was a guy there, and I was wearing a Rise of Skywalker t-shirt, and he's like, oh, so like, what do you think's going to happen in the movie? And he's basically like, I'm like, oh, what do you think? So I don't care about spewing my own ideas. I have a podcast if I want to spew my ideas. I want to hear what other people think, especially if it's a real world setting, not the computer. And he was giving me ideas, and I'm like, where are you getting these ideas from? He's like, oh, I love watching Mike Zero and Ethan Van Sciver. And I pretty much started pulling my hair out at that point. And I'm like, dude, if you want like objective, like, I don't even say objective, but if you want like rational thoughts and opinions on Star Wars, you could not go further outside the bounds than those two. Yeah. And again, I'm not saying that, again, for the same reason, again, is Mike Zero fake news? Of course he is. Do I think he should be deplatformed? Absolutely not. It's buyer beware, like we already discussed with Jason Ward and everybody else with their disclaimers. But it's the notion of how, like, there's just fans out there that just consume, I don't want to say everything. And there's just like how we say our BS meter, like mine's higher than yours. There are fans out there that have no filter to it, period. And it's just anything that the algorithm throws at them, whether it be Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Snapchat, Lord knows what. They just consume it, and it spreads like wildfire. And I like, not to reiterate your point, but it's like, how? Because the guy's like, oh, tell me about your podcast. And I'm like, I don't think you're my demographic. Because if you, like, I hope you listen to Knights of Vader, but if your primary bread and butter is Mike Zero and Ethan Van Sciver, we're not on the same plane at all.
He's created his own thing. It's spoiler fanfic. It's
but
really
he doesn't sell
weird.
it that way, though.
What's that?
He doesn't sell it that way, though. He's selling it.
Oh no, I know he doesn't. I absolutely know. I'm like genuinely curious. Like, is he just turn the camera off and just laugh? Does he just, you know? I mean, what kind of person can go and do that? I mean, is he fully aware? He's got to be, right? He has to be fully aware, unless he's just in order to do the level of work that he does to pump out the number of videos that he pumps out, right? There has to be a different level of self-awareness of what he's doing, and then just acceptance of it. Unless he's just living in a fantasy world and he's got incredible work ethic and skill. I don't know how else to explain it. It's the strangest thing, but he's created spoiler fanfic. It's like a whole different thing. Like, he's created his own little thing. I would imagine most of the people that watch his videos know that he's a liar and they do not care. It's the strangest thing I've ever seen. I
don't know, John. Like, I really hope that what you said is true, that, like, he's a charlatan, but he has a work ethic that's just aces. Right. But I don't think it's that, though. I think it's delusional. I really think, I honestly, John, you again, maybe because, again, I'm a millennial. John, you're what? Are you Generation X?
I'm 47. Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, you're Gen Xer. So, again, my generation is the worst thing on the face of this earth. It really is. And I could firmly believe he lives in his own delusional world. I think what he thinks is true. And what he'll do is, when he's wrong, he will go out on YouTube, much like when Ethan Van Sciver said that, like, Captain Marvel was going to be a flop at the box office. And he'll either circle the wagons and say, oh, what, they changed things halfway through, because I am so in tune. I can get through the leaks that JJ can't even plug them up. His only last resort was to reshoot things during the pickups period of the summer. I could see him doing that.
Yeah.
I honestly think first and foremost, he's a charlatan. And two, I genuinely think he's delusional.
He's got to be. I just, I mean, look, serial killers went and lived regular lives in the middle of when they were doing all their serial killing. Look at Ted Bundy, for crying out loud, right? If anybody watched the Netflix stuff on Ted Bundy, that guy just, he went through his life and lived his life, and yet he was a psycho. He was a murderous psychopath. So, I just equated Mike Zero to Ted Bundy. That's okay. You're not, there you go.
Other than the murdering and the sexual assault, you're not entirely wrong.
Right. All right. So let's. I want to ask you a question. This is more on the fun side of things, and
this wasn't fun.
No, this is fun, but I mean more of the Star Wars actual content side of things. I meant more of the actual stories,
the pulpy stuff,
the pulpy stuff, right? The stuff that we normally talk about on the show. So let's put aside Kevin Smith and how him and I have a lot in common because we cry at everything. Okay. Let's put aside that everything is amazing and fantastic to him. Okay. Let's just take it face value. Because I haven't talked about this on the show, and I there is a part of this that I'm genuinely curious to know what you think. But for those that I'm sure most people have heard, so Kevin Smith was on the set for The Rise of Skywalker, and he had the opportunity to walk into a particular set, and he was told, "Don't go in there, don't look at it. That set is for the final shot of the movie." A lot of people have gotten that wrong. A lot of people were saying it is the final shot of the movie, but it was just the set. Wasn't actually, the scene wasn't being shot at the time. And JJ had actually told him this. He's like, you don't want to go in there. it's the set for the final shot of the movie, and some of the other people around production said it will melt your mind if you see it. Okay. All right. So here's my question to you. What do you think that set? It's the question everyone's been asking, but as a fan, I want to know, what set do you think that could be that would cause that type of reaction with the fandom? What set for the final shot of the movie would be one that was so huge, right? So impactful that it would melt your mind in Zach's opinion?
Okay. Do you want the Zack answer first or the practical answer first?
Like what Zack wants, or
what
what
I want, and what do I think would melt Kevin Smith's mind?
Okay, let's go with what would you want? What set would it have to be to melt Zack's mind?
This is kind of a cop out of an answer, but I couldn't tell you. I would want to be so surprised. I want to be not see something I've never seen before, but I would want something that just, you know what? I love, and this is more the original trilogy, and to a lesser extent the prequels and the sequel trilogy. I love the final shot, whether it be, again, Star Wars, Empire, or Jedi, more Jedi, where you kind of like, you get the widescreen shot and they all kind of sit there. It becomes almost like portrait-esque. I guess instead of specifics, I would say I want something that's a little bit more like a nice bow. I want a nice bow on top. Not that everything has to be explained to the T where like Revenge of the Sith ends, where it's like, okay, Vader's next to Palpatine in the suit. Leia is brought to Alderaan by Bail Organa.
Right.
And then we see Obi-Wan hand off Luke to Uncle Owen and Aunt Beru. Not that. I don't want that Bowie. Even if it is, I don't care. It's their decision. But like, I don't want something specifically like that either, where it's like, okay, everybody goes into their specific corners. Like, I don't know, kind of like Kylo Ren goes off to a vineyard, and like I think you've talked about it a couple of times, and he retires, or he gets exiled. Something like that. Again, I wouldn't mind. I do think we're going to have some level of funeral, whether it be for Carrie Fisher or for Kylo Ren, or maybe Ben by the time for Ben Demption. I could definitely see that happening. It's a funeral mixed with a celebration, very Return of the Jedi-esque. I think it's a foregone conclusion. We're going to have like a half a dozen Force ghosts. They're all going to be like waving to Rey, saying, "Bye, Rey, until episode 10.
Right.
And I see that, though. But as a specific thing that obviously Kevin Smith is alluding to, I know the rumor going around is the Lars homestead.
Right.
I don't see that happening, considering that according to Jason Ward, they actually – some of their sets they used in Jordan were for that. I don't see why they would film part of that there and then recreate it on a soundstage. Don't see that.
Well, I know they couldn't. Just to kind of talk about that for a moment, because I've changed my opinion on that, and I'll give you mine in a second. But I know they can't film in Tunisia anymore because the region in Tunisia is just
a little too hot.
Yeah, it's too hot. It's too dangerous to go there now, just because all the tensions in the area. So it would make a level of sense if they found a location that kind of mimicked it in Jordan. And also would make some sense if they went and recreated it on a soundstage. I'm always, and I'll give you the example. I'm always shocked whenever I watch The Force Awakens, the first shot we get of Rey when she walks outside the Star Destroyer on Jakku and she takes down her mask and she takes a drink of water. That was on a soundstage, and it blows me away every time I watch that scene. The way they get that lighting. I mean, it doesn't look like a soundstage at all. It looks so flippin' real. So I could definitely see them sort of recreating the homestead and getting it just right, like that shot in The Force Awakens, to where it would look very much legit. So, anyways, continue.
No, okay, I didn't know that. Good to know. The more you know. When it comes to practical,
yeah, what do you think JJ would do?
This is the problem, though. So I do think he's going to do again, as John said it, and infamously, I'll never forget it until the day I die. If I'm going to see Star Wars Episode 7 and I don't get a cantina, I'll be like, what's up with that? Where's the cantina? And that haunts me. Like, I wake up in cold sweats every few nights, and I'm screaming that, like, where's the cantina?
I take a level of pride of exposing that for you.
Oh my God! I have no idea how that escaped me. I genuinely don't. It's a sound file on my computer now. I've used it so many times. Like, you know what? Instead of like editing it each time, just sitting there as an MP3 file. But no, I could see that again. I do think that they are going to try to resurrect Luke Skywalker, and I could see in the flesh, but it's going to be very Jesus Christ-esque, where he's going to come back for a short period of time, and then he's going to have to return to the netherworld of the Force. And the final shot is going to be he's going to have the lightsaber. It's going to be the one with the little black fastener in the middle of it, and he's going to be like, Rey, it belongs to you now. And the music will swell as he walks into the netherworld with the Force Ghost Kylo Ren, Force Ghost Anakin, Force Ghost Yoda, and that's the final shot. And it's just all of the main characters from all the Force Ghosts. Like I said, we're gonna have everybody's Force Ghost. We're gonna get Ponda Baba's Force Ghost arm. Everybody's Force Ghost walks into the glowing blue light. And that's how I see they could do that. Is Rey's sitting there watching all this happen, and that's the final shot of Star Wars for now, until 10 years from now, and we get episode 10. That's why I could see them doing something like that. I don't think it's going to be as slam dunky as just blatant reuse of iconography like the Lars Homestead, but I could see it. It's going to definitely work in nostalgia. JJ being the king of nostalgia, and you don't hire him to make this film unless you want him to plug in his best element. And that's how I see it. I see all the Force Ghosts walking into the netherworld of the Force Horizon as Rey watches.
Have you heard my theory on the Bendemption and what the Force Ghost could do? I like that idea. That's just me.
You know what, John? Remind me and your audience at the same time.
All right. So this is informed speculation.
There it is, folks.
So my thought was, because there's been a rumor going around about how potentially Kylo could die, but Ben gets redeemed, right? That's been going around for a while about, however Palpatine is going to be coming back and potential of, body switching and all this kind of nonsense. I had this thought that I thought was rad, where if it was a circumstance where Palpatine found the key to immortality by transferring his essence into other people, and if at some point in time he ended up possessing Kylo at the end of the film, and Kylo's fighting it, right? And the only way to get rid of Palpatine is to kill Kylo. And when that happens, let's say Rey has to strike a Kylo down. She knows she has to. She doesn't want to kill him, but she knows she has to get rid of Palpatine. But when that moment happens, the Force Ghosts show up and basically transfer whatever they had left that allowed them to be Force Ghosts into Ben Solo in order to bring him back.
Okay. Is that it? No. I just want to make sure that's it. I'm not trying to be.
No. Yeah, that was essentially it. It was off the cuff. I was thinking that would be interesting if you had Obi-Wan and Anakin and Luke and Yoda show up at Kylo Ren's death, and basically saying, we have to give whatever we have left. We're going to sacrifice our ability to be Force Ghosts in order to bring, Ben back, full redemption, and thus sort of completing the balance of the Force aspect. I thought that was interesting. I doubt they'll do it, but that was just a thought.
I like it. If Rian Johnson was making this film, I could firmly believe that possibly happening. But in JJ world, I could never see him sacrificing nostalgia for new characters. No, yeah. You protect the nostalgia at all cost. And that's my own, again, that's the practical side of me. As a fan, John, if that happened, I'd be on board with it. You have the old disappearing to protect the new. I love that. As a concept, that's great. I'm on board with that.
I think this movie's going to be massive, by the way. I think it's going to be, I was not under the impression it needed to be a long movie, but based off of everything that we kind of have been hearing, I think this movie's going to be on a very large, epic scale. I'm starting to get that feeling, just as a side note.
I agree with you. And I probably said the exact same thing about The Force Awakens, yet we see how that turned out.
Yeah, that was, yeah.
That is a very straightforward, concise story.
Yeah.
And I think the more they keep us in the dark, because that's the weird thing, though, is that they kept us in the dark with The Last Jedi. And I think that worked against them. And I do think they are going to try to tip their cards a little bit more with this than they did with the other ones, because they don't want that backlash. Because look what happened to Solo. They didn't start marketing Solo until 3 months before release. I do think we are going to get a little bit more of a trickling of information. Nothing really big. Remember, JJ is behind all this. But I that's the weird thing with this movie, though, is that I know you want to talk about the marketing and stuff of this movie. That's the weird thing, though, with Disney, though. is that everybody forgets this, that like when all Disney markets these things and they're not giving Star Wars any more priority. If anything, they're giving Star Wars less priority because it's more of a mature franchise compared to things like Marvel and Frozen and Maleficent 2, Maleficent Harder. It's all these. That's the thing that people have to realize. You have to look at Star Wars the same way the executives are looking at it. And that's not exactly fun to do if you're a Star Wars fan. Like, my perfect example is in 2021, we are getting 7 Marvel MCU projects. You know how many Star Wars projects we're getting in 2021? 2, maybe 3 if we're lucky. And that just shows you Star Wars isn't the priority for Disney. Because
all right,
go ahead.
Hold that thought, because we're going to get into this in a second.
Okay, sure.
I want to close out the.
Sure, sorry about that.
No, that's all right. No, because I want to talk about that. So for me, I initially thought that it would be the homestead and whatever sort of scenario that would entail. And there could be a number of different things. And I think a lot of that's going to depend on what ends up being fully revealed for what Rey's background truly is. You'd obviously have to have a reason to go back to Luke's homestead. I mean, there's just no doubt about that. Or even going even I thought it would be interesting too if they went to Anakin's, sort of former home, going back to the prequels. The more I thought about that, though, I thought, okay, well, if they did do the homestead, then the closing shot's going to be the binary sunset, and they're not. I can't imagine them doing that a third time. I just, they did it. It's iconic. And maybe that's really short-sighted on my part, but it's that iconic moment, in the hero's journey of Luke in A New Hope. It's the one shot that, gets shown over and over again. Lucas closed it out with Revenge of the Sith. I would be disappointed if that's what it ended up being again after all of this in 9. If we go back to the homestead and we're closing it out, standing there looking at the binary sunset again, I'd be like, nah, come on. So that being said, I honestly don't know what it could be. The only other thing, I don't think that JJ's brave enough to do what I would like to see. I would like to see it go full circle and have something prequel oriented.
I don't see that either.
No, depending on how the story came out, I like the idea of, I think it'd be really interesting of having Rey, and again, you got to get story beats right to kind of bring us to this point of why she would be there, but I think it would be interesting to see Rey, like on Coruscant, going to the former Jedi temple, and it's just been left alone all this time, and empty. Having her show up there, and sort of having, and I mean, I'm kind of getting a little bit of chills even thinking about it, but having her walk into the Jedi temple room with all the seats there, maybe on a sunset closing shot, and she's going to reestablish the Jedi. Like, for me, liking the prequels, that would be really cool. I'd love to go back to Naboo, take us all the way back to the very beginning, but I don't think he's going to do that. I think there's a possibility it could have something to do with Yavin and the award ceremony temple room. I know there's a lot of speculation going around about that. There was a shot at Celebration that showed the blockade runner that looked like it was on what looked to be like a Yavin location, and we won't get into. I'm still convinced that the Death Star is sitting on Endor, or one of the Endor moons. I don't think that's Yavin. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. But I think that if for some reason they had to go back to that original Rebel base and it was the throne room, from the end of A New Hope, I think that could be really interesting. But I'm kind of perplexed. I don't know what it could be for me, for this fan sitting here on a practical, not everybody's a hardcore fan standpoint, and I think Kevin Smith is a hardcore fan, but I don't put him in the classification that we are. So, like, what would end up melting his mind, or more specifically, what would melt J.J. Abrams' mind? You know what I mean? So, I can say, okay, this is another inference, folks. 2 things are going to happen at the end of this movie. We're going to have a grand celebration akin to A New Hope and Jedi. We're going to have that celebration. The Empire has been really defeated now. Trust us. It's the second time this has happened. It can't happen again. Palpatine doesn't get the third time. It's a charm rule. And 2, we're going to have some level of funeral. Whether it be for Leia or for Kylo Ren, someone's going to have a funeral. You have to have those 2 things. Because remember, that's how Jedi ended. You're going to have that to a degree.
And I think the whole thing, they have to also hammer home that this is the end of Star Wars, at least for now. And you're going to have a moment where there's going to be some level of farewell to Star Wars. Something, again, not to go back to Avengers Endgame, but I do think you're going to have some moment like Tony Stark had a heart all along, being pushed into the lake, and we have all the characters weeping as the camera slowly weaves through all of them. I think you laugh, but I can see that happening. Because you do need that moment of, think about Han Solo never had a funeral. Luke Skywalker never had a funeral. Yet think of all the funeral pyres we've had in Star Wars already. It's like even the Jawas got a funeral in A New Hope after they got killed by the stormtroopers. It's the idea that there needs to be some level of mourning and recognition. And that would tie in perfectly to it's like poetry, it rhymes, of Return of the Jedi.
I don't think the Falcon and Chewie are making it out of this thing, by the way.
Oh, no, they have to. They're at Galaxy's Edge.
But Galaxy's Edge is before The Rise of Skywalker.
Oh, no. They've said that's there so they can plug in elements after Episode 9 is out.
Nah.
They're not getting, trust me, Chewie's going to live for, now that, again, Peter Mayhew is gone, and was it Jonas Suetamo? Chewie's going to live forever, man. That Wookiee's going to be like 1,000 years old. There's a reason why that the characters that are hardwired into the Galaxy's Edge attraction are ones that are wearing like masks and like makeup and costumes. And that's the only thing I gotta say about you and Ben Demption is
all
that
right, we won't go down that road.
Whoa. Hold 1 second though. For Ben, this goes to the end of The Rise of Skywalker. There's a good chance that Kylo Ren, Ben Solo survives because they're not going to kill him off in this. And then the week before the movie comes out, have the Rise of the Resistance ride feature him as the villain. That'd be a major buzzkill to sit there, have him be because the Rise of the Resistance is supposed to be the greatest Disney ride ever made. It's better than the Haunted Mansion, better than Pirates of the Caribbean. And there's no way they're going to have him be the primary villain. Apparently there's like 2 or 3 animatronics of him in this ride. And there's no way they're going to put that much effort into him just to kill him off a week later.
I'm not, no, I don't think, I'm fully on the Ben Demption bandwagon for me personally. I think that I don't see him dying in this movie. I think the arc has always been that he's gonna get redeemed at the end to the point of living. I again need to know details of how that works out. And I've always been of the opinion that if he doesn't make it through, that for me it kind of discounts the sacrifice that Han made, you know. So that's it. That's my view. And I don't think, and I've talked about this on the show too. I think there's something up with the helmet. I think there's something wonky going on in The Rise of Skywalker when it comes to that stupid helmet. And I'm not fully I'm not even fully convinced that he even dons the thing and that somebody else hasn't put it on. And I don't want to go down the road of imposter, but at the same time, I'm not convinced that there's something up with that stupid helmet. I don't know if you heard.
That's a good point.
J.J. Abrams. I will never ever forget. And I went back and I found it for a recent episode before The Force Awakens came out, when we were all just salivating for every little detail that we could get, and making Star Wars was ruining it for everybody, and I was more than happy to allow myself to be ruined. J.J. Abrams said in an interview before the movie came out, we will find out the origins of that helmet in The Force Awakens. He said those exact words. Now, he could have been lying. I think they pulled it. And I think that there's something up with that dumb helmet, and that's why it's featured in the trailer, and that's why we haven't officially seen him with it on. We've seen the toy artwork. We've seen that little stupid pendant, if you've seen it, that artistic pendant from Loungefly that has that artistic sort of motif of Rey facing off against a helmeted, what do you think is Kylo Ren with water in the background. But we also know that shot from Vanity Fair was them fighting. That wasn't something they just staged. That was from the movie. And he doesn't have the helmet on. So
that's a good point. You're on to something there.
Yeah, there's something up with that stupid helmet. And I'm more and more convinced that he may not even ever put that sucker on. And that might be, sort of the Knights of Ren if Kylo goes to, join up with the Resistance because, the Palpatine Sith fleet has arrived and he realizes that, this is not the way I want it to go. And the Knights of Ren are like, screw you, dude. We'll have somebody else go and put it on.
That you're onto something there. You're right. That's profound because I didn't think of it that way. And that would be a great thing all along. So we'll save it for later.
All right, so let's get into this one. We got a few minutes left. Let me ask you. This is, and I don't complain a lot. This is just not mine. It's not my style. I will say this, and I've said this for a long time. I do not like the way that Disney handles the marketing of Star Wars. I just don't. The Star Wars show, I watch it every week, and every week I go, it's missed opportunities. There's no reason why you can't bring on anybody from the production of The Rise of Skywalker and talk about any little bit of minutia that gives away nothing for the movie, and talk about the film, talk about the way that things are shot. Why not have the guy on who made the lightsabers lighter, like what Daisy Ridley said, to give them more fluidity when they're doing their lightsaber battles? Why not have that guy on? It drives me nuts. And to what you were saying a moment ago with the way that they're handling the MCU and how Kevin Feige has really just sort of, he's on his game. I was of the opinion that when Endgame was done, that it would be tough to get the Marvel fandom hyped for more movies. And yet, San Diego Comic-Con, and granted, D23 is around the corner. Disney could step up their game. That being said, San Diego Comic-Con, they put out their slate of films and they bring their actors out. They don't even say anything. They're on the stage for 30 seconds. Natalie Portman's got the Thor's hammer and everyone's like, woo, we're freaking out. And I was like, why in the hell can't you do this for Star Wars? I do not understand. And it reminds me, and then I'll let you go on your rant. It reminds me of, you seen Social Network?
Oh, of course. It's one of my favorite films.
All right. So, but yeah, mine too. So Social Network. It reminds me of the conversation between Eduardo and Zuckerberg when he's wanting to sell the advertising. And Zuckerberg's like, no, we don't even know what it is yet. We don't know. It's like, I feel like Disney's sitting there going, they don't know what it is. They don't know how to deal with it. They don't know how to handle it. And it's like it's like Eduardo and Zuckerberg having this debate back and forth of how they want to go in and deal with it. And nobody is getting it right. In my opinion, there's no reason to starve the fandom the way that they are right now. And I know we're going to get inundated with ads coming up here in a couple of months, and this will all be moot. But right now, for all the hundreds of Star Wars podcasts that are out there, you're just asking for disaster and having people speculate and grab onto all these rumors by not providing any little nuggets for us to chew on. It drives me nuts. Bah.
See, folks, I'm doing the Palpatine thing. Good. Yeah,
this is my John news talk show coming forward. That's what's happening now.
Let the hate flow through you. No, you bring up there's a lot of good points there. I think it's less. Again, Disney understand. Think about it, they're an entertainment conglomerate. They understand. They have so many different divisions of the company. I think they could do something, but they're taking an attitude very similarly to how they're with all their properties. And something I say on Knights of Vader a lot is that they don't make the movies, John, for you and I. They make them for the person that buys their ticket, walks into the theater, walks out, tweets about it, then forgets about the movie. Those are the people that got Avengers Endgame to $2.5 billion. And I think I said on this past week of Knights of Vader is that I have I don't even know what she's like my second or third cousin. She's 13 years old, by no means a Marvel person. She comes with her and her father. We always go see the new Star Wars movies ever since the Disney era. We go opening night. And she does not like Marvel. Not she doesn't like Marvel. She's kind of indifferent to it. It's not her thing. Yet she's seen Spider-Man Far From Home 3 times already this month because her friends like to go. And her friends, they're not looking at Far From Home like, oh my God, that's J. Jonah Jameson. Oh my God, you can add that if you want. Oh look, oh my God, I can't believe they revealed who Peter Parker is in the post-credits scene. They're not looking at it that way. To them, it's the equivalent of after school you go to McDonald's and you get a milkshake and a thing of fries. It's just something to do socially. And that's what I think Disney is looking at these are. They are properties. They're there to generate money. So when people see The Rise of Skywalker or Endgame, they'll then say, oh, like a month later, oh, there's a new ride at Disney World. Or, oh, look, there's that T-shirt with that graphic I like. Not that I know that argument that these things have been commercials to sell merchandise has been around forever since A New Hope. But I do think it's the attitude of they're not concerned about what you and I think. Like, they want us to be happy. They don't want us to be mad. But at the same time, though, they're learning – I think they're learning lessons the hard way. And going to your point, they're not really learning any lessons at all, because I think there probably is – I don't know how strong it is, but probably a movement within Lucasfilm saying, or at least an idea that Solo bombed. There's no arguing that. Solo bombed. And I don't think they know exactly why it bombed. And the easiest reason is they didn't market it properly. Because there was a rule of thumb that I learned was that a movie's opening weekend is the marketing. Everything after that is word of mouth. It doesn't matter how great your marketing was after the first weekend. That goes all out the window. It's word of mouth. And Solo had not a great, but a decent opening weekend for opening a month after Infinity War and a week after Deadpool 2. $80 million on Memorial Day weekend, which over time is becoming less and less of a movie-going weekend, is not bad. But Solo should have done better everywhere on top of that. And there's the narrative as well that there's the not my Star Wars people. There's the fandom menace. And it's weird that, like, this argument of Disney is trying to, again, Disney is not my Star Wars. Nobody official is pushing back upon that. Can you imagine if there was a contingent of the Marvel fan base that was screaming, Natalie Portman, Jane Foster, Thor is not my Thor. Hashtag not my Thor. Boycott Thor 4. You know how fast there would be a firewall and a pushback on that? It'd be instantaneous. Yet when that happened with The Last Jedi, the only people giving pushback were you, I, and even the Making Star Warses and the Steel Warses. They tried for the first month, and not to say that they gave up, but they more or less said, whatever. There's no firewall to inane Star Wars criticism. That's not to say that you can't like The Last Jedi. You can dislike it all you want, but you can't hate it because it didn't do what you mentally wanted it to do. And it's weird that there's nothing official, like you said, whether it be the Star Wars show. I'm honest to God shocked there's not an official Star Wars podcast at this point. I'm surprised Andy Gutierrez isn't doing a Star Wars podcast every week. Like, that's another missed opportunity. And like you said, they really should be pushing back on this, yet they're not.
Well, and I think too that they don't have to do like their own Star Wars podcast if they would just feed some information, if they would just give more than what they're giving. I like watching the Star Wars show, but, and for crying out loud, how many shows have combined like the two of us done, right? Yeah. And we're not making any money off of this. We're just doing it for fun. But being a hardcore fan, right, which we obviously are, I don't care that much about hearing from the authors of the books. That doesn't really interest me all that much. I mean, I watch it and it's kind of cool and the comics are kind of cool. I like when we get more background, but I want to know about the films and I want to know, about the mythology. And I don't know why do we have to find out about these other movies coming out, the next series, when they put out the slate of releases, and then why can't we be told what they are? I don't understand that logic, because you could feed all those podcasts. You can give them all, informed information without spoiling anything. It perplexes me. I really do not understand, because there's so many small, little, simple things they could do that could really keep the fandom engaged and keep the fandom happy and keep the podcast going. And I mean, you can tell when there's not much to talk about. I mean, it's clear when you listen to all the podcast shows, right?
Yeah, you end up doing an episode on Star Wars parodies from the 1980s. That's exactly.
Just, you gotta kind of dig deep and find out what interests you and talk about that stuff. And it's also been noticed in the fandom. I mentioned this on last week's show. Listened to a couple of different shows, and they all consistently had themes like this of not understanding why they continue to be so secretive. And I can understand like sort of holding out for the Rise of Skywalker because, you know, they have a marketing plan that they stick to that's worked for them before. Didn't work for Solo, but it's worked for the other films. And I get that. But when it comes to the future properties and I'll throw this one here. When it comes to like Rian Johnson, you know, why can't Disney just come out and say, this is what you announced that he was going to do his own set of movies. You said it was going to be in a different universe with all new characters and a whole new timeline and all that. And yet ever since then, it's been nothing but rampant speculation, especially after the response pro and con to The Last Jedi. Why can't you just come out and say, you know, Benioff and Weiss are doing those movies. They're producing, not directing. We're not going to give titles yet, but we'll tell you what era they're in. And Rian Johnson will be working on these movies then. They have to know. I do not understand why they can't simply go and say those things unless they're still so up in the air. They're too afraid because of all the nonsense that's happened with the production of the other movies. It really dumbfounds me.
Well, okay, there's many answers to that question, or to that just train of thought.
But they do it all with. I'm going to throw this out there. They do it all with Marvel.
Yeah, but Marvel has it down to a science at this point. And that's why even on Knights of Vader, my audience gets mad at me for always bringing up Marvel. And I tell them, it's like, folks, Marvel is the gold standard. Everybody in Hollywood, including Lucasfilm, everyone is trying to emulate that model. It would be stupid to ignore that just because it's not Star Wars. And especially considering that they're corporate cousins, it's all the more reason to focus on it. And again, to get back to your point about just all these things about like kind of like the future, I think after Solo, that threw the entire chessboard up in the air for them. They got so nervous after that because it was, again, Disney movies do not fail. Tomorrowland fails. John Carter fails. Their weird like offshoot movies fail. But the time-tested brands, especially the one that they paid $4 billion for, that doesn't fail. And you combine that with a bad marketing campaign, a horrendous behind-the-scenes situation, and a very vocal part of the fandom that's out for blood and the destruction of Star Wars. Like, make no mistakes, folks. Like we already said, Ethan Van Sciver wants to destroy Star Wars. That is his goal. Or at the very least, he's good until it can't stop, or until it stops making him money. And I think they're scared out of their minds for that reason. Because look at even like you said with Benioff and Weiss. Forget Rian Johnson. Rian Johnson's thing is at least a couple years away from now. There's a very real possibility, especially after the Game of Thrones quote unquote backlash. Who knows how real that even is? There's a possibility that they get rid of Benioff and Weiss. At this point, when it comes to Disney Star Wars projects, you have more of a chance being a director being fired from the films than seeing it through to its conclusion. I wouldn't be surprised that come March of next year, once like Rise of Skywalker's out on like digital and Blu-ray, that they're just, you know what, creative differences. We're bringing in a new creative team. I wouldn't be surprised. And that's why I think we're not hearing anything. And John, you remember the rumors. The Thursday night Solo came out. James Mangold was directing the Boba Fett film. Remember those rumors from Variety? Yep. And guess what? By that Monday, or it was that Sunday afternoon when they realized Solo was going to bomb. Those James Mangold thing went out the window overnight. And that wasn't a Making Star Wars report. I think that was Variety. And they have more clout than Bespin Bulletin or Jason Moore does at this point when it comes to official Hollywood gossip. And that's nothing against those two, just saying it. I think part of the reason why we don't get news about Star Wars. And plus there's the whole thing that happened with Rogue One. That Rogue One teaser trailer is an oddity because we've never forget Star Wars. We haven't seen that really in a movie outside of Josh Trank's Fantastic Four, where 3/4 of the shots in that weren't in the film.
70%. 70% of the shots in that trailer were not in the film.
Like, even look at my favorite shot of that trailer is Krennic wading through the water at dusk. It's right. Like that scene couldn't even happen in the film that we saw because the Battle of Scarif takes place during the day. There's no aftermath to the Battle of Scarif. It's called a hole. It's called a giant hole in the planet. That's the aftermath to the Battle of Scarif. And you look at that, and I think that's another reason why too that like it took so long for the Rise of Skywalker title and trailer. And I think we're probably get some stuff at D23. They have to give us something to tide us over, but we're probably not going to get another trailer until Monday Night Football sometime in October. And then we'll get a bunch of TV spots in November and December. And that's kind of the game plan, like the marketing plan at this point. It's very cookie cutter. It's very rigid.
I will change my tune. Let me put it this way, and I'm gonna spin this back around. I'll bring back my positive self. Look, I say all these things because of my love of Star Wars. I think we both do. I will change my tune if when we go to D23 here in a couple weeks. Most likely we'll get that behind the scenes trailer, that they always give us. We should have gotten it already. I think that's part of the problem right now is that usually it comes out with San Diego Comic-Con, but they've moved it over to D23. If at D23 they do the slate of films moving forward, I'll change my tune. If we get a hard reset and they say, okay, here's the deal. They bring up the screen, right? And you've seen all the people that have dummied up the Photoshop of their dream sort of slate of movies. If they do that at D23, I will be impressed, and I will pull back on my criticism of how they're currently handling things. I'm about 50-50. That's going to happen. For me, what I wish that Disney would do moving forward with Star Wars based off everything that's happened is I think one of the biggest problems that they have comparative to the MCU, it's a timeline issue. The jumping around of the different timelines of the story films, right? Rogue One and Solo. I think that's been, Lucas obviously did that with the prequels, but I think that's been kind of the Achilles heel for Disney when they started. And what I hope they do moving forward is I hope that the reset on the theatrical releases is a timeline that starts at point A, and then from all the theatrical releases moving forward, we're going forward in whatever timeline that is. That's what I hope that they do. If they happen to jump back to prequel, I'm okay with that, as long as they go back so far that we can get 10 years worth of movies from all the sort of old Republic-esque stuff. Or jump forward after The Rise of Skywalker, find a starting point, and then build the movies forward from there so it's linear, and save all of the other timeline Star Wars jumping stuff for the Disney Plus streaming service. Let the Cassian Andor, and the in-between 3 and 4, let the post, 7 or 6, Return of the Jedi, let that be on the streaming service, and all the theatrical releases follow a straightforward timeline. That, to me, is how Disney can really do the right thing with Star Wars moving forward. What do you think?
I agree, because, again, we don't need to be convinced. Like, when Jyn Erso was the protagonist after Rey the following year, everybody made fun about, oh, man, 2 British brunettes, how confusing. And I know people like Pablo Hidalgo were making fun of people like that. But to general moviegoers who don't live this stuff like you and I do, and the audience of My Nerd World does, those people need to have their hand held. There's a reason why every Marvel film holds people's hands going through the whole way. And that's part of the reason why those films all make $1 billion a piece now. They know their audience. And yes, they're going to start dipping their toe into the water with the Black Widow movie kind of like pinballing across the timeline. But going back to your point about a future slate of movies, I would say there's a 0% chance of that happening because they don't want any of the attention being taken away from The Rise of Skywalker. But come Celebration 2020, I can wholeheartedly believe that's going to be that'll be its own panel, the future of Star Wars.
Yeah.
And you'll get a Kevin Feige level thing with probably Warwick Davis, or by that time, maybe even Daisy Ridley doing it, or maybe even John Boyega hosting the panel. And I could see them doing it there. They're not doing it before The Rise of Skywalker.
No. Yeah, you're probably right. And I hope they do. But, I know the focus on The Rise of Skywalker. And maybe that's what next year's Celebration was going to be focused on. I'll be going to that. I'm going to go out to we've already got our passes to because I was born and raised out there, so we're going to Celebration next year in August, and hopefully, I thought that was odd they were doing it in August. I thought that was odd they were doing it after we just had one this year. So hopefully next year at Celebration is when they sort of hit the reset button and reestablish, because it's like I love my Star Wars. I love my Star Wars. But I'm a frustrated fan from that standpoint that we can't seem to. It's hard to get excited for the future, and subsequently it makes it kind of difficult. It kind of casts a shadow on the Rise of Skywalker when you don't know what else is. It's one thing to say this is the end. They're not making any more movies like we've been through before. It's a whole other thing to say, yeah, we got Rise of Skywalker. It's the end of these 9 films. We got other movies coming out, but we're not going to give you any sort of clue as to, we don't even know if the people that we said are going to be directing are going to be directing them. It bums me out. I don't want to be bummed out as a Star Wars fan.
But I think there's also a level to this, too. That, like, if you go back to that Rise of Skywalker trailer, it says, again, you probably know better than I do, but I'm paraphrasing, like the legendary conclusion to the grand saga. I think as part of their marketing for this film, they want to sell the filthy casuals, the normies out there, that this is the last Star Wars film. Then come August or wherever, whether it be maybe March, April, again, Lucasfilm has a nasty habit of announcing things at the stockholders meetings and
right.
on the quarterly income calls, whatever it's called. That's where they announce things too, but I could see them deliberately keeping everything hush hush so they can sell this as the finale. Because think about it. There's a reason why they didn't announce Phase 4 of the MCU until after Endgame was out. They don't want the normies thinking, oh, Endgame isn't the finale. There's 10 more things coming out over the next 2 years. Because and the example I give to this is like the Monday after The Avengers came out, Disney issued a press release saying, we've announced Avengers 2 directed by Joss Whedon and the whole cast is returning. And I'm like, duh, after a film makes that much money, why wouldn't you do a sequel? And then I think it was like that September at like the MTV Movie Awards, they won some award for like, I don't know, best fight, best movie. And Joss Whedon was on stage and he's like, oh, I'm proud to announce that and the whole crowd hushed. We're doing Avengers 2, summer 2015. And all the headlines were Joss Whedon announces Avengers 2, summer 2015. And I'm like, folks, 5 months ago, they announced it in a press release. But guess what though? The press and the normies don't pick up on that sort of thing. The hardcores do. And that's what they're counting on. Disney is again, they're making weird decisions, Disney and Lucasfilm. I'm not going to argue that, though. But they are looking at it in the sense of they are playing 4D chess right now. They're trying to use time to their advantage when it comes to selling the Rise of Skywalker. But the problem, though, is that marketing movies isn't exclusively just their channels. Like, as weird as it may sound, we have influence. Very small influence compared to a multi-million-dollar marketing plan, but Ethan Van Sciver has influence. Bespin Bulletin has influence. Lord help us all, Mike Zero has influence. And that's yeah, I wish I could.
I know.
But they need to combat that. They really do. And by combat it, I'm not saying that they ban people or deplatform them or platform them. They need to have something out there, and whether that's through even people like us, if they don't want Andy Gutierrez to do this sort of stuff, they need a specific, probably 3 to 6 people team at Lucasfilm that are fan ambassadors or fandom ambassadors. And they reach out to different podcasts, not just the biggies out there, but to like, I don't know, a rotating door of like, oh, you host a Star Wars podcast? We're going to throw you a bone. And if you, I don't know, they have a contest. Like if you're a Star Wars podcast or website or YouTube channel, enter to win. And if you like every month we'll have a drawing and you get to interview Anthony Daniels or Sam Witwer, or heck, even there's a really big one, like you said, it'll be the production designer or the costume designer behind the Benioff and Weiss first film. They might not be able to say much though, but they'll at least tell you what it's like to do things. They need to do stuff like that.
Yeah.
They have to embrace the fandom. And it's weird. I mean, even Marvel's not doing this. Kevin Feige isn't embracing the fandom. He's embracing their pocketbooks and wallets, but he's not embracing the fandom that way. And I think it's so weird that considering something like that doesn't cost a lot of money, it's so easy. But I guess the attitude is that we're doing it for free as it is, and would be enthusiastic regardless of their intervention. But I do think not to harp on this point again, but I guess it's a missed opportunity across the board not to get the fandom involved in an official way.
Yeah, no, I agree. Well, we'll see. We'll save this, and we'll see how many of our how many of our predictions come true.
Yes.
Along with our dreams. Hey, Zach, before we let you go, go ahead and let everybody know where they can find you, when they can listen, and just anything you want to go and promote.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Jon Justice. It was an absolute pleasure being on My Nerd World. As I've said numerous times on Knights of Vader, it's the only Star Wars podcast I listen to. And on top, yes, it's true. I guess I steer clear of all the other ones. Like, keeps them away from me.
You're smarter than I am.
But no, you can find me on the Knights of Vader podcast, as John so graciously gives a shout out every now and again. And you can also find me on the Cinemodities podcast, where we talk about weird movies, but also look at popular contemporary movies under the lens of how weird they are. We delve in things from like The Cat in the Hat to Avengers Endgame, all the way to currently we're doing the sketch comedy Fort Month, where we're talking about things like Chappelle's Show, Key and Peele, The Amanda Show. So if you're into that sort of stuff, you can definitely find me on either one of those podcasts if you need some more pessimism sprinkled into your daily life.
And I want to mention too, and then we're going to get to listener feedback on the show, but I want to mention that go to the Knights of Vader feed and go and listen to your box office prediction show. And this is my hard pitch. I am tired of caring, and I wish I didn't care, and I try not to care about box office returns. I'm over it. I hate that it's the barometer that we look to and all that stuff. It turns me off. All that being said, I listened to your show where you gave your prediction, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. It was one of my favorite episodes of yours that you've done. What I liked the most about it was the amount of work that you put into it, how into it you were, your enthusiasm carried me through, and I really liked and appreciated the way that you handled it and the takes that you took, and how you sort of took the, box office returns compared to the previous movies, along with sort of injecting the other variables that don't get factored into those types of things. So again, if it's not even your bag to look at box office numbers, go and listen to that Knights of Vader episode, because it was, I was one of those, I drove home, listened to it, got home, kept it on out of the car, walked down to my office, did work, and kept listening to it because I was enjoying it that much. So there's a hard sell. Go and check it out. And kudos to you, man, because that was a really good episode. You did a great job.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It's nice when hard work gets applauded. Thank you.
Yeah,
sir.
man. All right, everybody go listen to it. Drive its numbers up because it deserves more listens. And with that, Zach, I'll say thank you, and we will go ahead and dive into listener feedback for this week.
I need someone to show me my place in all this.
I really hope you enjoyed the conversation that I had with Zach. We had a good time recording it. He's a really good dude. I like his show a lot, and like I mentioned in the show, definitely go and check out that box office show that he did. It's really, really good and interesting stuff. All right, let's go ahead and get into listener feedback this week. Got a lot of comments, and I want to get through as many of them as possible. TalkShowNerd@gmail.com. You can also leave a comment up on YouTube as well. We'll start off with Mav11, and this goes back to something that Zach and I talked about, and something that we're going to talk at length about on next week's show. But Kevin Smith, Silent Bob, I can't think of his name, but he said in an interview that The Last Jedi will melt your mind. JJ told him he could look, but he wouldn't, but it would melt your mind. Literal flash to Mustafar, and he goes the other way. This is all dark past versus all light past. And again, like I said, we thank you for the comment, Mav11. I appreciate it. I'm still torn on what that could be, and I've got an article, again, that we'll get to on next week's show where we'll talk more about this final shot further. Bloodheel writes this: Star Wars will eventually become as popular as Marvel. They just need to find a formula and know what the mass audience wants. I'm hoping at D23 we will get an announcement of an Obi-Wan TV series. Yep, we were talking about that. And what Rian Johnson and Benioff and Weiss are doing. Hoping it's Old Republic. We're in that time frame. I'm guessing the start of the Jedi and the Sith. That's just me guessing the way Disney is going. Thank you, Bloodheel. I do not disagree. Shock Fitness writes this: some of the Vader comments have him really being defiant towards the Emperor and even plotting against him while still being evil and killing Jedi. I like this anti-hero take on Vader more than the subservient Vader who walks on eggshells around Palpatine that other Vader comics depicted. And I'm pretty sure that's Charles Scholl that you're referring to, and he's the one who's doing the Rise of Kylo Ren comic series that'll be coming out before The Rise of Skywalker. Friend of the show, Skydrathic, writes this. I have only one problem. I'm full-heartedly supporting Rey and Kylo bringing balance together, with him on the dark side being good and her on the light allowing anger. But my question is, how do we then define their relationship? For me, the highest high descriptions for something like this is love, because it's more than friendship. It basically makes them soulmates, and with them being male and female, and Rey already having a best friend Finn, what else is there than a romantic relationship? That's a really good point. Thank you, Skydrathic, as always. Irritated Pumpkin. I heard an interesting idea about Kylo Ren's repaired helmet, which came from Star Wars Explained on YouTube a while back. There is this Japanese art of kintsugi, which is the repair of an object with gold inlays with obvious repair lines. It looks very similar to Kylo's helmet. It's the philosophy of not hiding the object's history and past to show its journey. This is described on Wikipedia. It can relate to Japanese philosophy of no mind, which encompasses the concepts of non-attachment, acceptance of change, and fate as aspects of human life. If you Google the Japanese art of kintsugi, it looks very close to what's happening with Kylo's helmet. I have a feeling the helmet might be put back together using red kyber crystal as the inlay to enhance Kylo's force ability, or at the very least look cool. Anyways, thanks, John. I got a theory for you. Thank you, Pumpkin. I appreciate it. All right, let's take that. What if that inlay is the essence of Palpatine? What if somehow he's in, maybe it is kyber crystal, but maybe he's in a kyber crystal, and it is melted down and used to reform the helmet, and it's not Kylo Ren that ends up wearing it. Dun, dun, dun. Again, we talked about this with a bit with Zack, but something's up with that helmet. I'm sticking to that. All right. Friend of the show, Ella B, writes this. Yet another article writer who is just repeating stuff that's been metaed on the Reylo Tumblr at some point in the last year and a half. Of course, Reylo leads to romance. Otherwise, what's the point? Balance between a man and a woman that leads to romance and babies and furthers a dynasty is way more intensive and transformative than balance that just leads to a nice friendship. This is a space opera. I hope you're right. I do. I don't disagree, but I hope you're right. Black-Eyed Lily says this. I got done listening to your podcast for this week and included listener feedback from someone who was sending you a link to an essay covers a lot of the reincarnation theory. This is something that has fascinated me for a long time. They want me to send the link to them. I definitely will. Whether it ends up being the literal reincarnation or the symbolic that Rey and Ben mirror Padme and Anakin, there's a lot of evidence for it. This theory even has a name in the Reylo fandom. It's referred to as reverse Anadala. Yep, I have heard that. All right, Stephanie S. writes this. I don't mind either way, whether or not they put out more information trailers. I plan on watching Episode 9, as do I. Disney is darned if they do. People will complain they gave out too much information, and darned if they don't right now, with people complaining, like me, they aren't putting out more trailers. I don't necessarily need more trailers. I just want more little tidbits. Just stuff around the edges that doesn't ruin any of the movie. Be that as it may. You have some good comments here, Stephanie. If you plan on going to see 9, it shouldn't matter either way. P.S. People need to stop listening, watching those who claim they have inside sources. I think you know the people who I'm talking about. Yeah, again, it's all personal responsibility on how you take in and what you take in and what you don't, and that's how I always kind of put it. I like the speculation. I had a buddy of mine, the guy that I do the show with, he always shakes his head when I find spoilers about the movies, and you're like, why are you ruining the experience when you go to the theater, at the end of the year? And I go, because this is the fun part for me leading up to the film. Sure, I could be completely spoiler-free between now and opening night of the Rise of Skywalker, and I'll have an amazing, experience that first time watching, but every subsequent viewing, I will have seen what had happened. So I'm willing to sacrifice a bit of that in order to have a lot of fun on the speculation bandwagon leading up to the film. Deskizi Pro says, there will be no Reylo. There is no reason for it, at least in romantic form. I disagree, but I appreciate your comment. All right, let's go to Simone. Okay, so I rarely talk out loud as a response to what you're saying, so I thought it was important to share. So there it is. When you were commenting that Rey/Kylo/Ben left him alive in the throne room, so not only to spare his life once but twice, in the novel it goes over her thoughts during the duel on Starkiller Base. At the end, she knows she can't kill him, but she knows she can kill him, but she doesn't. Both times, she doesn't feel it's her place to kill him and that his fate is in the hands of the Force. I think this is very important. Also, not only does she not kill him in The Last Jedi, but she puts his lightsaber back on his hilt. Come on! That's all. Hashtag Raylo. Hashtag Bendemption. Really bright red heart. Thank you very much for that. I very much appreciate it. Let's see. I got a lengthy piece here from Dale. We'll run through some of the finer points. I agree with most of the comments about Ben and Rey becoming more than friends. Bendemption is already set up. Differences are mended. The helmet is mended. The legacy saber is mended. Ties are mended. How far will he go before he turns back to the light, before we realize his purpose, before another way is realized? That's the only question I have. I agree the helmet being repaired, and Kylo probably won't wear it. It may be Kylo that gets it repaired, or one of the Knights of Ren who will Knights of Ren will misunderstand and get it repaired. However, the symbolism of the red kyber crystal welding seams is synonymous to the red thief, and this is where they also get into the same thing that the other individual did earlier. Let's see. Let's go down to here. The way we consider Anakin and Darth as separate people, we'll begin to see Palpatine and Sidious also as separate people, separate entities. The mind-melting factor will be Palpatine is the one who's redeemed. Well, I got to back up here real quick. So I'm sorry, I skipped through something, and he gets into a lot of stuff here. My predictions are along the lines of this. Here we go. Sith troopers following Kylo, but they also have ties to Rey, so they won't harm her and accept her will to not harm those on her side. And accept her will to not harm those on her side. Sidious created them from her, and maybe a twin brother who senses her through the Force, and are programmed to protect him as well, which ends up being contradictory in a sense. In the same way we consider Anakin and Darth Vader separate people, we'll begin to see Palpatine and Sidious as separate people. The mind-melting factor will be Palpatine is the one who's redeemed, allowing the ascension of the Skywalker family, Qui-Gon, Obi-Wan, and himself into Mortis, or the world between worlds, or maybe they'll become wills again. 3PO gets his red arm replaced, and the repair droid hooks up the deleted memory chips. He reveals the past, how he was Sidious's droid when Sidious failed to create life. He cut 3PO into shreds and left him to be dumped on Tatooine to be found and rebuilt by Anakin. I'm not sure how far the past to 3PO may go, but it's possible he could have been in the dark side for a long time, over 5,000 years. It may be his time to retire with his old friend R2-D2. The finishing touch, I think somehow they'll have someone who can wield the key to the bright star, the obsidian in the ring. Mustafar will be returned to its former state of beauty, along with many other changes in the galaxy, restoring planets like Jakku, Tatooine to thriving, flourishing worlds. Maybe Ben and Rey live on Mustafar or Naboo, or wherever they decide to call home, but together they will spread the teachings and balance to the galaxy. Wow, Dale, that is pretty intense and interesting. I'm going to actually hang on to that for the sake of time and not get back into it now, but I'm going to hang on to that and revisit it because I really like some of the thoughts you had in that. Let's see. Oh, Mary has a question. Can you kindly post a link to the Blaster app that you refer to? There's a lot of Blaster apps in the App Store, but I can't find the one that looks like social media. Okay, so the Blaster app you can find at theblasterapp.com, or if you go to the App Store for your iPhone, put the two words together, Blaster app together, and you can find the Blaster app. I am putting out audio blasts very, very often. Winter and Bloom says this. Another great show. Thank you. Two things. One, the fact that people are still hanging on to Rey's parentage is starting to get annoying. We had our answer about who she is. The answer was disappointing, but with reason. It was supposed to be the kind of disappointment we feel with the character, to make us feel emotionally connected with her. Two, Having someone else wear Kylo's mask and impersonate him is actually an interesting idea. I come across the question of whether or not it is commonly known that Kylo is really Ben Solo every so often, and the movies don't really specify. If it isn't commonly known, then it could make Ben's redemption and ability to live a life afterward a lot easier. If someone else takes Kylo's identity and dies, the average person would think that justice was served to a bad man, and then Ben can rise, hopefully as a hero who saves the galaxy. Oh, I'm digging that too. Thank you so much for the comment. Let's see. Anna writes this. I mean, come on, of course Reylo leads to romance. We are still in July. They're not giving away the romantic Reylo just yet. Winky face emoji. Thank you, Anna. Pemberfoot, 79. Loving your show, subscribed. Thank you very much, Pemberfoot. I definitely appreciate that. Friend of the show, Bonnie, writes this. So far, we have seen pics or film of C-3PO appearing to be a soldier in The Rise of Skywalker. We are also reminded that R2-D2, Padme's, and C-3PO, built by Anakin, will be in all 9 movies. I really want to know what roles those two will play in The Rise of Skywalker. What if the Resistance discovers info about Anakin if they have to reprogram C-3PO to be a soldier? What if R2-D2 was also reprogrammed for some reason, and we also learn more of Padme's past? It would be so cool at the very least if it is discovered that Anakin built C-3PO for his mom, and R2-D2 was with Padme from a young age, teenager at least. I know there is an Obi-Wan comment at the end of the 3rd prequel movie where he says the droids will have their memory wiped. Then we have Obi-Wan not even recognizing R2-D2 in A New Hope, but there was nothing that could be done about that given when these movies were made. But R2-D2 still has all those memories, and so this may coincide with the other leak or the other informed speculation about R2's memories being loaded into C-3PO. Because he'd never had his mind wiped. Let's see. Sheep Cow writes this. I'm so looking forward to whatever we're going to get at D23. I hope we get the character posters and the behind-the-scenes reel. I tend to be pretty positive about Disney Star Wars, but I do agree with you about the lack of information they're giving fans. It's just sort of ridiculous. I understand the intent to keep an atmosphere of secrecy, but it's been taken too far. They have left us starving for details. Right, this goes back to our comments with Zack. Let's see. They left us starving for details because we know little to nothing about the Rise of Skywalker. Even the most ridiculous theories are contemplated. I hope Disney eases off the secrecy after D23. It is very exhausting as the hardcore fan to deal with my frustration as well as the whole fandom. Wow. That's about as negative as I've been for a while. Thanks for listening to my rant. Awesome show. May the force be with you. No, I'm right there, Sheep Cow. Let's see. R. Wraith writes this. I think Rey is a Force-sensitive clone. Well, okay then. Let's go to... See, I'm working through my emails here. Across the Stars. Here we go. Oh, yep, they're totally giving Kylo a death stare in the photo. This was the photo that I talked about in the bonus episode from earlier this week of Rey, Finn, and Poe standing there, and Rey's got her lightsaber ignited, and there's a C-3PO right up close to the camera, and you can see a red glow, and they look to be on a desert cave. I think in the trailer, when you see Poe and Finn out in the desert where Finn is holding Rey's staff, I think they're watching Rey flipping over the silencer move. I agree with you. And then the behind-the-scenes shot of Kylo in the desert from Celebration is probably from that as well. Yep, I agree. I absolutely agree with that, too. Thank you for the comment. Ellen writes this. Hi, John. I've been a fan for a few months now. This is my first time commenting because I just had a small epiphany of sorts while listening. This new leak says Sith troopers eject out of their TIE fighters to engage in combat. This must have some connection to the opening shot of the Rise of Skywalker teaser. If that really is Rey and Ben training each other, it makes so much sense now why they would practice hopping on top of a TIE fighter. I can see that, if that's the way the story goes. I do think that we're closer to... I'm leaning towards now that that's the beginning of a fight. And this is going to be the moment where they fight, they do the Force Flash fights, and then because of whatever happens in that battle, they end up deciding to join forces. But at this point, informed speculation, everything's possible. David Beckham writes this. Great podcast. I love The Last Jedi, too. David, because you have good taste. Thank you. Let's see. Deskeezy Pro writes this. Dang it, I didn't want to get excited, but here I am. And this was the person who went back and made the other comment before about Raylo not happening. Thank you, Deskeezy. I appreciate that. JJ Williams writes this. Love the spoiler leaks in your podcast. Thanks for this interrupting your regularly scheduled programming. By the way, got your first book. Looking forward to reading the second. Thank you, JJ. I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. Princess Cupcakes. Here we go. What a treat to have you pop up in my subscriptions on Tuesday. I totally agree with you about Lucasfilm having set up the directions the characters were going to take and then allowing the directors the freedom to decide how they got there. JJ's The Last Jedi interview with Wired Magazine pretty much confirms this. He says, what Larry and I did was set up certain key relationships, certain key questions, conflicts, and questions and conflicts. And we knew where things were going. We had meetings with Ryan and Ron Bergman, the producer of 8. They were watching the dailies when we were shooting our movie. We wanted them to be a part of the process to make the transition to their film as seamless as possible. I showed Ryan an early cut of the movie because he knew he was doing rewrites and prepping. And as executive producer of 8, I need that movie to be really good. Withholding serves no one, and certainly not the fans. So we've been as transparent as possible. The way some of these Star Wars YouTubers talk, you'd think that Lucasfilm just told Ryan to make up whatever and go with it. I get so stinking tired of the nonsense. Thank you, Princess Cupcakes. I agree. Julianne writes this. A bonus episode. What a nice surprise. Congrats on the release of your second book. Thank you so much for that. All right, let's go to Miranda. You know it's a good day if you drop a video in the middle of the week with news that is so urgent waiting until the end of the week is impossible. You're absolutely right, Miranda. That's why I did it. Andrea writes this. I'm sitting here listening to your lovely podcast. Thank you. While I work, such a breath of fresh air. I've said it before, I'll say it again. I love your positive attitude. I'm sure this has been mentioned before, but I can't get the line that Luke said in the teaser trailer out of my head. 1,000 generations live in you now. The only conclusion that I can draw from is that is that he's speaking to either Kylo of the future children he could have, to Rey about the future children she could have, to both of them about their potential future children, or Rey already carrying Ben's child. I'm not going to lie. I hope that it's Rey carrying Ben's child. What are your thoughts on this? Love your show. I would be down. I would be down with that. I'm absolutely not going to lie. That would be really interesting. I'd be curious how the fandom would feel. But I've always liked the idea of the end of this movie of Rey and Kylo going off together as the physical manifestation of the balance in the Force. I'll be happy with whatever the content creators do, but that's what I've been most excited for. All right, one more comment here. We're back to Miranda. More than likely, she says this. I'm not expecting this comment to be read as part of the feedback at the end of the show. Well, you were wrong, because I like your comment. The next show, that is, but I just got to give you kudos. And, of course, this is you referring to the mention of Red Letter Media at the end. I got to give you kudos for not caving in and consuming or even giving them 15 seconds of fame for their overly negative side of YouTube, since they're becoming more rampant and hard to avoid. Because it just creates the kind of atmosphere that we don't really need to have, and we should stay away from in a time that things are more aggressive, especially taking it out on something as simple as Star Wars. I hate the fact that there's always been an abundance of drama and negativity for that, for the most part. It's unnecessary, and it doesn't really go anywhere. And that's what I mean when I say that it's important that we have channels like this. Thank you. I agree. And several others to keep up the positivity, especially for the younger viewers. Because of all the negativity, it's going to turn them off, and most definitely the media side of the drama is the furthest thing from helping. They have a tendency to twist and turn the words from the actors. There's not enough balance when it comes to the content on the internet. It's just two halves of extreme parties having a contest, running around like Vikings. So kudos to you for not caving in or giving them their 15 seconds of fame. Thank you, Miranda. It's just not my. I don't want any part of it. And there's that new one they've got going around that I know has been getting a ton of attention, talking about time travel. I haven't even clicked on it. I'm just not gonna go there. All right, so that wraps up the show for this week. Before we get to the close of this week's show, For those that aren't familiar, and again, I do want to genuinely say thank you for downloading the show, and thank you for listening to me promote the products and the other content that I create, and especially my book in all these episodes. This is how you have to market. This is how you have to get the word out about the stuff you create when it comes to books. And I'm trying to build up an audience apart from the entities that I have. You guys are fantastic. The listeners to my radio show are fantastic. But I also need to build up in the world of readers apart from the podcast. And hopefully we can bring all those groups together, right? And that's where you guys come in and you can help me do that. I'm going to run a very special ad that I've created. Talking about both books for those that are unfamiliar, and then we'll go and close the show out. Please go on by to Amazon.com and go find book 1 of my EMBARK series and the just released book 2, like I mentioned earlier, and pick up the ebook for you or a friend. Free, right? For all you fence sitters, the first book is free on ebook. It will only be free today, Saturday, and Sunday, depending on when you're listening to it. Then it'll go back to its normal price, probably 99 cents for the time being. But you can gift it to a friend there. So if you've got somebody, you got a buddy, hey, do you read any science fiction? I'm going to gift you this book by this podcaster that I listen to and that I like. And if you get the free one, do me a favor and spend $1 and get the ebook for 99 cents for Treasure in Darkness, or pick up the paperbacks. Obviously, right? They're more expensive at $11.99. But it's a fantastic way to support the show, and I really, really would appreciate it. I also, even if you don't do either of those things, that's totally okay. I'm just glad that you listen every single week and you allow me the opportunity to go and promote, and don't give me too much of a hard time for it. All right, so for those that aren't familiar with the stories at all of what these EMBARK science fiction space opera books are about that I keep referencing and that I want you to go by, here is me in an ad that I produced talking about these books, and then at the end of this, we'll close it out and say our goodbyes, and I'll tell you what's coming up next week. In the not-so-distant future, flight culture has replaced car culture. Two of Earth's largest corporations now supply the planet with the technology and fuel to make air and space flight available to everyone. Taft Guardia spends his weekends at an abandoned flying field, racing through the skies with his 3 best friends and the girl he longs to be with, Keitha Morrow. After receiving a mysterious message from her deceased NASA scientist father, Keitha and Taft make a shocking discovery. With Earth now suddenly facing a great disaster, a ruthless and power-hungry enemy emerges. Unwittingly, Taft, Keitha, and their friends are thrust into the middle of humanity's fight for survival and future among the stars. You can pick up EMBARK Book 1 right now at Amazon.com for free in ebook and $11.99 for paperback. A purchase of either the ebook or the paperback will get you the audiobook narrated and produced by Jon Justice for just $7.50. And just released, EMBARK Treasure in Darkness Book 2. Earth is nothing but a memory. 6 years have passed since an industrial catastrophe forced a planet-wide evacuation. Taft Guardia, Keitha Morrow, and the young Ultra Raiders launched a crushing assault on Mars against the military might of D-Corp and the evil Sint Argum, saving millions fleeing to the stars. Most of Earth's survivors have settled on Zima and the surrounding planets, orbiting the star Proxima Centauri. No one has seen or heard anything from the inhabitants of the red planet since. The first search and salvage mission at a space graveyard near Saturn, led by Torian, is unexpectedly attacked. Is this the ruthless Sint Argum and D-Corp returning, or a new enemy emerging? Taft, Keitha, and their friends must now unravel the mystery and protect their home on Zima before it's too late. You can pick up EMBARK Treasure in Darkness Book 2 right now at Amazon.com. The ebook is only 99 cents, the paperback is $11.99, and the audiobook will be coming later in August. Go to Amazon.com right now and search for EMBARK and Jon Justice to pick up both of these science fiction space opera novels, with Book 3 in the trilogy coming by the end of the year. Thank you so much for spending time with the show this week. Thank you for the support of not only my nerd world, but also for the support of my attempts to become a successful author. I really, really do appreciate it, and I hope you'll go to Amazon.com right now and pick up your copies of the book, either for you or a friend. And they are good for all ages. I've got 11 and 12-year-olds who have read the first book and are reading the second book, and they absolutely love it. And I've got adults all the way up into their 70s that are reading the books, and they enjoy them as well. So they are good for all ages. So if you've got kids, or you're friends with kids, or you've got friends with kids, pick them up a copy as well, and it's a great way to go and support the show. All right. I've talked about the book enough, and we've covered a lot of Star Wars. We'll be back again next week. And next week, more of your listener feedback. If I missed any of your listener feedback from this week, don't worry. It'll be in the rotation for next week. And we'll also dive into, depending on what news breaks between now and next Saturday, we'll get into 7 different potential locations for the alleged mind-melting final scene for The Rise of Skywalker. All right, that's it. Go buy my book. Have yourself a fantastic week. Thanks again for listening, and we'll talk to you real soon.
The Force will be with you, always.
My Nerd World.